Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anna Delvey. Anna Sorokin was born on January 23, 1991 in Domodedovo, a city south of Moscow, Russia. Her father was a truck driver and her mother ran a small shop. In 2007, when she was 16, Anna and her family moved to Germany. Her father became a manager of a transport company, but the company went bankrupt in 2013. He then worked in the heating and cooling industry. During this time, Anna's mother took care of the family. Anna attended a Catholic school. Anna is reserved and modest. She also had difficulty learning German. In 2010, Anna began studying at an art and design college, but Anna dropped out in 2013. At the age of 22, she moved to Paris and started a new life. In Paris, Anna interned at a French fashion magazine and began using the name Anna Delvey. She claimed that Delvey was her mother's maiden name, but it was not. In Paris, Anna attended various fashion events and social gatherings. Her parents supported Anna financially as much as they could, and Anna always reassured them that investing in her future was a wise decision. In 2016, Anna moved to New York. Thanks to her relationship with Oliver Zam, the editor-in-chief of the French magazine where she interned. Anna was a regular at high-class social events. Anna met the rich and famous at these gatherings. At these events, Anna introduced herself as Anna Delvey, a wealthy heiress from Germany. She claimed to have a fortune of 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Many people are still speculating about Anna's father's true occupation. Some people thought he was a diplomat, others thought he owned an oil company, and some of Anna's acquaintances believed his work was related to the antiques trade. While in New York, Anna befriended the famous art collector Michael Suffolhang. Michael shared with her his dream of opening a private art museum. When Michael told her about his plans to attend an art exhibition in Venice, Italy, Anna expressed her desire to join him. Michael agreed to let Anna attend and paid for Anna's flight and hotel accommodation, on the condition that Anna would reimburse Michael later. However, while in Venice, Anna surprisingly paid for everything in cash, which Michael found strange. When they returned to New York, Anna was in no hurry to return the money to Michael. Eventually, Michael forgone the $3,000 outstanding. In New York, Anna befriended Rachel Williams, a former photo editor for a famous fashion magazine. Although Rachel found Anna demanding and rude, they maintained a close relationship. Anna began sharing her business idea with her friends. She wanted to buy a historic building on Park Avenue in Manhattan to create an art space called the Anna Delvey Foundation. The building would include galleries, shops, restaurants, bars, and a bakery on 6 floors. To convince others of her idea, Anna created fake financial documents using specialized software. These documents were intended to prove that she owned 60 million euros in Swiss bank accounts. Before that, Anna had taken out small loans to maintain her lavish lifestyle, and she often relied on the help of various financial advisors. In November 2016, Anna went to the City National Bank and applied for a loan of $22 million. Her reason for the loan was to finance the renovation of a historic building in collaboration with renowned designers and restorers. She mentioned that the funding was necessary because her assets were located outside the United States. Anna provided forged documents showing that she owned 60 million euros. However, the loan processing ran into problems when a bank employee noticed irregularities in the documents. The employee requested a report verifying Anna's foreign assets. The bank employee then received the document via email, which was from a person named Peter Henney. However, the bank employees were suspicious of the document because it was sent from a personal account. Anna explained that Peter was her family's financial advisor. The bank continued to scrutinize Anna's documents. But after a few months, they refused to lend to Anna because she could not prove the origin of the Swiss funds. After being rejected by the bank, Anna Delvey sought financial support from Fortress Investment Group. However, the company's CEO became suspicious of Anna's loan application due to inconsistencies in her documents. Specifically, Anna claimed to be of German origin, but her passport showed that she was born in Russia. This raised doubts about the authenticity of the information Anna provided. When the CEO began to examine Anna's assets more closely and wanted to meet her Swiss bankers in person, Anna quickly withdrew her loan application to avoid further scrutiny or investigation into her affairs. Anna's journey of fraud began with her seeking to borrow a large sum of money. Despite the difficulties and the need for guarantees from major financial institutions, she still managed to borrow $220,000 from various banks using forged documents. This success allowed her to enjoy a lavish lifestyle for many months. In 2017, Anna hosted a lavish birthday party at a luxury restaurant. However, after the party ended, the restaurant staff had to contact the guests to find Anna's contact information, as she had left without paying the bill. Anna finally resolved the issue by paying the debt in cash in February 2017. Anna also made an impression when she checked into the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna gave Neff Davis a $100 tip in exchange for information about the most upscale restaurant in Soho. Neff Davis noticed that other hotel guests often had a negative view of Anna because she often wandered around the hotel in her bathrobe. Despite this, the hotel staff were eager to serve Anna, as she was known for leaving generous tips. Anna and Neff Davis gradually developed a close relationship. Neff Davis became Anna's personal assistant. Anna paid Neff Davis's salary by inviting Neff Davis to fancy restaurants, taking Anna to high-end beauty salons and organizing luxury massages. Once, Neff Davis was invited by Anna to an exclusive party attended by famous actor McAllister. While staying at high-end hotels, Anna enjoyed many luxurious experiences. She often went to high-end beauty salons to get eyelash extensions done by top experts, costing around $400 per session. In addition, Anna also shopped for products from luxury brands and often dined at expensive restaurants. All expenses were deducted from her account at the 11 Howard Hotel. After 3 weeks of staying at the hotel management discovered that the credit card information Anna provided when checking into the room was invalid. The hotel owner demanded that Anna immediately pay the $30,000 bill. At this time, Anna was almost out of money due to her frequent spending on expensive food and services. This caused Anna's number of friends to decrease significantly, and Anna only spent time with 3 friends, Neff Davis, Casey, and Rachel. When asked about her financial situation, Anna remained silent. Once, Anna invited Neff Davis to dinner at a restaurant. After the meal, when Anna tried to pay with her bank card, her transaction was declined. She then gave the waiter 12 different credit card numbers, but none of them were accepted. Therefore, Neff Davis had to use his savings to pay the $283 bill. However, a few days later, Anna repaid Neff Davis the money, even paying back 3 times the amount owed in cash. In April 2017, Anna used forged documents to secure a $70,000 loan. She quickly used $30,000 of the money to pay off her outstanding bill at the 11 Howard Hotel. Anna Delvey planned to attend an annual investor meeting in May 2017, hoping to meet billionaire Warren Buffett. That same month, Anna invited a group of friends, including journalist Rachel Williams, fitness trainer Casey Duke, and a camera crew, on a trip to Morocco. The purpose of the trip was to film a documentary about the founding of her charity, the Anna Delvey Foundation. To stay, Anna booked a luxury villa in a 5-star hotel complex, priced at $7,000 a night. The villa had 3 bedrooms, a private pool, and an assistant. However, the trip ran into some problems. Early in the vacation, Casey Duke suffered from food poisoning and had to return to the United States for medical care. Later, the hotel staff informed Anna that they were unable to process her credit card payment. When she was unable to pay, Anna convinced Rachel Williams to pay the large bill of $62,000, an amount equal to Rachel's annual income. Rachel paid for Anna's trip to Morocco, Anna's extensive shopping spree, and her private tour of the Majorelle Gardens on Rachel's credit card. Anna promised to reimburse Rachel for these expenses. However, upon their return, Anna only paid Rachel $5,000, and then had to borrow money from others to pay for her New York apartment. In July 2017, complaints about Anna began to surface, particularly from designer Mark Cremers. Mark Cremers demanded payment for her work totaling $17,000. During this time, Anna frequently moved between hotels, accumulating significant debt, and repeatedly defaulting on her bills. Eventually, Anna found her financial situation dire. She and Casey met at a restaurant to discuss her life and Anna's financial situation. At first, Anna avoided answering, but the conversation soon brought her to tears. Anna claimed that she could solve her financial problems if Anna could buy back the historic building. However, Rachel also realized that she would have a hard time recovering the money Anna owed Rachel. Rachel decided to write a letter to the local prosecutor's office denouncing Anna. Within an hour, law enforcement officers contacted Rachel and informed her that they were conducting a criminal investigation against Anna Delvey. Anna Delvey was arrested on October 3, 2017, at a rehabilitation center in Los Angeles and was charged with grand theft and check fraud. By the spring of 2019, at the age of 28, Anna was facing a months-long court case that resulted in Anna having to pay debts totaling at least $275,000 to various organizations and individuals. In 2016 to 2017, prosecutors alleged that Anna Delvey committed the fraud over a 10-month period. From November 20, 2016, to August 2017. According to prosecutors, Anna's modus operandi included financing the lavish lifestyles of her middle-class friends to avoid raising suspicions about her wealth. In turn, Anna relied on wealthier acquaintances who were less vigilant about their spending to cover Anna's expenses. In her defense, Anna's lawyer asserted that she was confident in her future financial capabilities and that she could repay the debts Anna had incurred. During the trial, she frequently wore high-end outfits and expressed dissatisfaction with the way the press covered the trial. Although she did not consider herself a scammer, she was eventually convicted and sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison, along with a $24,000 fine. She was also ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution to her victims. In an interview, Anna admitted that she did not regret her past actions. She even stated that if given the chance, she would make the same decisions again. In 2019, Rachel Williams published a book titled My Friend Anna. The book chronicled Rachel's experiences with the scammer and the profound impact her trip to Morocco had on her life. Despite being detained, Anna's social media accounts remained active. Through her posts, Anna instructed her followers on how to contact her and how to send her money using cryptocurrency. During her time in prison, Anna paid special attention to her health and appearance. Anna committed to sleeping at least 12 hours a day and practicing yoga for 9 hours a week. Anna is proud of her positive changes. Without a phone, Anna spent her time reading. However, she was unhappy with the prison menu, especially the lack of fresh greens and broccoli. To improve the situation, Anna made her own nut milk, grew her own vegetables, and experimented with new organic products in the prison cafeteria. After serving her 4-year sentence, Anna Delvey was released on February 11, 2021. After her release, she returned to her lavish lifestyle by moving into a luxury hotel. This was made possible by the money she received from Netflix, who bought the rights to adapt her story. Part of this income was used to pay off some of Anna's outstanding debts. However, Anna's freedom did not last long. Just 6 weeks after her release, on March 25, 2021, Anna Delvey was arrested by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Anna was detained for 18 months due to her expired security visa. The decision to detain her was made because the immigration judge judged that if released, Anna would likely return to her fraudulent behavior. In February 2022, Netflix premiered the film Inventing Anna, written by Shonda Rhimes, starring Julia Garner as Anna Delvey. It is reported that Netflix paid Sorokina $320,000 for the rights to her story. Anna is currently under house arrest in an apartment in New York. During this time, she is not allowed to use the internet and strictly adheres to this rule. However, Anna still keeps in touch with her family by phone and is allowed to attend some meetings on Thursdays. Anna also continues her artistic activities by participating in magazine photo shoots and giving interviews. Recently, Anna had the opportunity to celebrate her 32nd birthday at her New York home in January 2023. Currently, Anna is nurturing ambitious plans for the future. One of her plans is to launch her own reality TV show. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Hu, where she grew up in a peaceful environment with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined individual with a strong personality. She had already made up her mind to study architecture in Australia before completing her education. Lisa's love for travel was sparked by numerous trips with her parents to various countries, which also instilled in her a sense of independence from her teenage years. To earn her own money, she took on part-time jobs. In the summer of 2015, at the age of 17, Lisa landed her first job at a cafe located about 40 minutes from her home. Initially, her parents drove her to work, but soon her father gifted her a scooter. The scooter was a welcome gift, allowing her to commute to work independently. However, for the first few weeks, her father accompanied to ensure her safety, as she had limited experience driving on the roads. Lisa only works on weekends and her father always takes her to and from the cafe home. However, on June 7th, her father decided to let her drive herself. On that particular day, her parents visited her at work during lunch, when the cafe was very busy. They had a quick snack together before returning home. Later that day, at 6:23, Lisa sent her father a text saying she was leaving work. 3 minutes later, he received a call from her, but there was no answer when he picked up. He heard a soft voice over the phone, and the sound of a car door closing, leading him to believe that Lisa had accidentally dialed his number while talking to a coworker. Despite calling out her name several times, he got no response and eventually ended the call, expecting her to arrive home soon. However, as the minutes ticked by, Lisa failed to show up, causing her parents to grow increasingly worried. It was her first time driving the scooter alone, and her father was deeply concerned for her safety. He attempted to call her multiple times, but her phone was turned off. After a few more minutes of waiting, Lisa's father decided to drive along the route she would have taken, hoping to meet her along the way. He drove slowly, scanning the road for any sign of her, fearing she might have been in an accident. Despite his efforts, there was no sign of Lisa. The man arrived at the cafe where his daughter Lisa worked, but she wasn't there. However, her scooter was parked outside, which initially calmed his nerves. But upon closer inspection, he noticed her scooter keys were still in the ignition and her helmet was hanging from the handle. This discovery raised his concerns, as Lisa would never leave her scooter unattended. Around the same time, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to get some information about her daughter's whereabouts. The cafe owner claimed to be unaware of Lisa's location and explained that she had spoken to her employees earlier, who said they were closing the cafe. The cafe owner then drove to the cafe and met up with Lisa's father. Together, they began searching the cafe and its surroundings. The cafe owner also enlisted the help of 4 friends who lived nearby. As the search continued, Lisa's mother and older sister checked the bus schedule, thinking it was possible that Lisa might have taken the bus instead of her scooter. They drove to the bus stop in their town, but unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Despite their efforts, Lisa's family was still unable to find her, and their concerns continued to grow. Lisa's relatives quickly contacted the police after realizing she was missing. It was nearly 1 p.m. Police quickly conducted an extensive search. A crucial discovery was Lisa's scooter, which was left in the parking lot with the keys still in it, leading the police to suspect she might have been abducted. Abductions are extremely rare in Sweden, particularly in Lisa's rural hometown, so the police responded swiftly by deploying multiple search teams with dogs and having officers canvass every nearby house. As news of Lisa's disappearance spread, her classmates and friends took to social media to raise awareness and potentially gather witness accounts. Despite the overnight search, no progress was made. On Monday morning, the police publicly announced Lisa's disappearance and urged anyone with information to come forward. Around the same time, a man working at a barn across from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives re-examined a barn previously inspected on the evening of Lisa's disappearance and discovered a glove. They presented the glove to Lisa's parents, who identified it as their daughter's, providing further evidence for the abduction theory. Police have stepped up the search by sending additional personnel and equipment to assist. By then, Lisa's disappearance had made national headlines, drawing hundreds of volunteers to the search. On Tuesday, the police received multiple leads. A group of volunteers searched a dirt road near the cafe, finding a phone case, receipt, ticket, and broken smartphone screen. After discovering these items, investigators confirmed that they all belonged to Lisa, so they concentrated the search in that area. Further investigation yielded additional parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and more receipts. These items were all scattered along the same dirt road, increasing the police's certainty that Lisa was indeed a victim of abduction. The search for Lisa quickly gained a large amount of attention and support, with the number of people involved growing significantly each day. This case became the main news story in Sweden. Hundreds of volunteers from across the country flocked to participate in the search. A group of local volunteers specializing in finding missing people also participated in the search for Lisa. This made Lisa's search operation the largest in Sweden's modern history, with over 1,000 people involved. The police received numerous calls with potential leads. A woman reported a suspicious incident while she was jogging the day before Lisa went missing. A man standing next to his car stopped her on the road and asked for directions to an unfamiliar city in English. When she tried to help him using Google Maps, the man asked her to get into his car to show the route on his navigator. The woman found this request suspicious and refused, continuing her jog instead. The woman shared a crucial detail with the police. She believed she had seen the man before, among the workers repairing a barn across the road from the cafe where Lisa was last seen. On the day Lisa went missing, her co-workers noticed something unusual. A witness saw 2 men standing across the road from the cafe, stared at the shop. Although the witness didn't think much of it at the time, but she shared this detail with the police after Lisa's disappearance. The following morning, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings were found. As they went further, they found Lisa's driver's license and house keys. It seemed that Lisa's abductor was throwing her belongings out of a vehicle. Despite all efforts, police and volunteers found no other clues in the area. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was driving home from the search when he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. He decided to re-examine the barn for clues. The friend retrieved a flashlight from his car as it was getting dark and searched the barn for several minutes. He soon spotted something shiny on the floor, which turned out to be a woman's earring, along with an identical earring nearby. The man reported his discovery to the police, who then showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. After confirming that the earrings belonged to their daughter, the police conducted a more thorough search of the storehouse. Initially, the detective explained that the primary focus on the first day of the search was finding Lisa herself. As a result, the barn was not thoroughly inspected, and small items like earrings may have been overlooked. This time, however, numerous forensic experts and search dogs were brought in to aid in the investigation. During the more extensive search, the police found a piece of evidence behind one of the walls that initially seemed unrelated to the case: human feces. Forensic experts, however, proposed an intriguing theory. According to them, in the aftermath of committing severe crimes, the perpetrator's body often releases a significant amount of adrenaline, sometimes leading to a sudden and uncontrollable urge to defecate. It's not uncommon for perpetrators to lose control of their bodily functions due to adrenaline during a crime. Given that Lisa's glove and earrings were discovered in the storehouse, investigators suspected that if she was abducted, the perpetrator might have taken her to the storehouse. They considered the possibility that the perpetrator, under the influence of adrenaline, might have relieved themselves and left behind feces. These feces were subsequently sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers searched a farm approximately 2 miles from the cafe. The farm consisted of several large buildings with many employees, and the search team decided to inspect each one. Shortly after their arrival, 2 men appeared, communicating only in English as they didn't speak Swedish. One of them claimed that the police had already searched the farm, but the search team leader was skeptical. He believed he would have been informed if the police had indeed visited the farm, so he decided to proceed with the search. The 2 men observed the volunteers for a while before leaving. About an hour later, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones hidden underneath. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and confirmed that the items found were indeed Lisa's. To gather more evidence, forensic experts were dispatched to the farm for a thorough investigation. Detectives also investigated the story about 2 suspicious men who attempted to deter volunteers from searching the farm. During their inquiry, the police revisited a report from a woman who encountered an English-speaking man while jogging. The police had a potential suspect in mind. In the early stages of the search, they had visited nearby houses, includes a house where 2 Lithuanian brothers live with their wives. What caught the police's attention was that these 3 individuals did not speak Swedish and communicated in English, making them the only people in the area who did not speak the local language. Additionally, the police had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at a barn near the cafe and the farm where Lisa's helmet was found, indicating they were familiar with these locations. Furthermore, the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were discovered led directly to their house. The police decided to question the 3 individuals since they were the prime suspects. Meanwhile, forensic experts and volunteers arrived at the farm to continue their inspection. Their attention was drawn to an old, neglected trailer surrounded by tall grass, which seemed abandoned for years. However, the flattened grass near the door suggested recent activity. Trapped grass under the door also indicated it had been opened recently. Upon opening the door, the forensic experts were met with a strong smell of decay. Inside, they found a changing room with multiple clothing lockers. All are locked except one. This led them to suspect that Lisa's body might be inside one of the locked lockers. However, They eventually found Lisa's body in an unlocked closet, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small space, the perpetrator managed to fit Lisa inside. A rope was around her neck, and her head was covered with a large amount of tape. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts concluded that Lisa's cause of death was strangulation, with no evidence of sexual assault. Her clothing was sent to the lab for further examination. As news of her body's discovery spread rapidly across the country, the case had already been making headlines in Sweden. The brutality of Lisa's murder shocked the entire nation, as such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden. A strange and disturbing discovery was made on YouTube the same day her body was discovered. A video titled 13, featuring a countdown timer, had been posted 13 days before the murder. What makes this video scarier is that it was uploaded to a channel called Lisa Home. News of the video spread quickly through the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some speculated that the murder had been predicted, but it was later revealed that the channel name and video title had been changed after Lisa's body was discovered, explaining the eerie coincidence. This has raised concerns that this could be a joke or an attempt to create another conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, the police worked day and night tirelessly to catch Lisa's murderer and solve the case as quickly as possible. At the time of the discovery, investigators had already questioned 2 brothers and a woman, all of whom denied any involvement in the murder. The 3 individuals claimed to have been at home at the time of the abduction, providing alibis for one another. According to their accounts, the older brother, Narigis, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was using the computer. Narigis also stated that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to a gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police were skeptical of their alibis, as it was possible that the 3 were covering for each other. DNA samples were collected, but initially, no evidence directly linked any of them to the murder. However, this was short-lived. Forensic experts were working diligently in the storehouse and on the farm, utilizing all available resources, and soon their efforts paid off. In the storehouse, a small office-like room was discovered with a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon investigation, experts found 15 semen stains on the walls and floor near the window, suggesting someone had been standing there, watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and engaging in self-gratification. The semen samples were sent to the lab for analysis, and DNA profiles were quickly extracted. All 15 samples matched the DNA of 35-year-old Narigis. Additionally, the feces found in the storehouse also belonged to him. In the adjacent room, previously used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor with a thick layer of dust, except for a small strip. The size of this strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was also found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Narigis. On the floor beneath the pipe, a piece of the same rope was discovered. Experts analyzed it and found 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Narigis's. This discovery was an important clue for the police. This indicates that the rope used to kill Lisa was related to Narigis. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the room where Lisa's body was found, a hair belonging to her. Further investigation revealed DNA traces from Narigis on Lisa's jacket, leading the police to believe she was killed in that location. Police have been studying the evidence and using it to piece together what might have happened. Narigis had been watching the cafe for some time and waited for an opportunity to strike. When Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her, possibly asking for directions or using another tactic to gain her trust. He may have then asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Given Lisa's kind nature and willingness to help others, it's likely she agreed to help him. Once she was in the car, Narigis taped her mouth shut and drove her to the storehouse. There, he bound her with a rope. According to medical experts, the killer's adrenaline rush at the scene may have caused him to lose control of his bodily functions, resulting in defecation on the floor. After Lisa's death, the perpetrator placed her body in the car and drove to the farm, discarding her belongings along the way. He then hid her body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes. The entire ordeal, from abduction to hiding the body, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Narigis maintains his innocence despite mounting evidence against him. His wife and younger brother were released due to lack of evidence and promptly returned to their home country, Lithuania. The trial preparations were intense, with Narigis claiming his DNA was found at the crime scene because he had worked in the storehouse for a long time. He also provided an alibi, which was corroborated by his wife and brother, although their credibility was questionable. This defense may work in court, but the finding of Narigis' DNA on Lisa's clothing suggests direct contact on the day of the murder. Furthermore, a witness reported seeing Narigis' car near the cafe around the time of Lisa's abduction, contradicting his alibi. The car was seen driving back and forth between the cafe and the farm, while Narigis claimed to have been sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. Months after Lisa's body was discovered, experts continued to analyze the evidence using advanced equipment. They found Narigis' DNA on nearly all of Lisa's clothing, including her underwear. Given the high-profile nature of the case, investigators sought additional clues to solidify the evidence against Narigis. As part of their investigation, they traveled to Lithuania to re-question Narigis' wife and brother. Narigis' wife maintained her initial alibi, claiming he was at home between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. However, when detectives spoke with Narigis' younger brother, they finally obtained the information they needed. After being presented with the evidence against Narigis and the details of the crime, the younger brother revealed that Narigis was not at home that evening. According to the younger brother, Narigis returned around 7:30 p.m., covered in dirt, and immediately washed his clothes. When the police began questioning the residents and approached their house, Narigis instructed his brother to tell police he was home at the time of the crime. Narigis later explained that he was afraid of being wrongly accused due to his immigrant status and lack of alibi during the abduction. The younger brother initially believed Narigis innocent, but after learning about the evidence, he realized this wasn't true. A month after murder, a large crowd attended Lisa's funeral, far exceeding the church's capacity of 130 people. To accommodate the mourners, organizers set up benches and large screens outside, allowing everyone to watch the ceremony. 4 months later, the trial began. Narigis' lawyer argued that his client's DNA on Lisa's clothing could be explained by his work in the storehouse. However, the prosecution countered that this explanation didn't hold up, especially regarding Lisa's underwear. The only plausible way Narigis' DNA could have ended up on her underwear was through direct contact. The lawyer failed to provide any evidence supporting Narigis' innocence. At one point, lawyers suggested an alternative theory, that Narigis' younger brother was the real killer. The lawyer failed to address the possibility of DNA manipulation during the trial, which lasted a month and resulted in Narigis being found guilty of murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security Swedish prison, which offered relatively comfortable living conditions. Narigis' lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict but was unsuccessful. In 2017, Narigis made a surprising decision when he requested to be deported to a prison in Lithuania. Despite Lithuanian prisons being notoriously worse than Swedish ones, the court granted his request, probably because it would result in substantial cost savings for Swedish taxpayers. It did not take long to understand the reason behind Narigis' decision. He appealed to the Lithuanian court and successfully had his sentence reduced from life to 15 years. However, this victory was short-lived, as the court later overturned the decision, reinstating his life sentence. Unfortunately for Neregis, he was now stuck in a Lithuanian prison, with no chance of returning to the more comfortable Swedish prison. In August 2022, 5 years after his initial imprisonment, Neregis has been transferred to another prison in Lithuania, where he encountered another life-threatening situation. During a block transfer, an inmate attacked Neregis with a shank, causing severe injuries that ultimately led to his death on the way to the hospital. Regarding Neregis' wife, the question of her involvement in the crime remains unclear. Although police believe it is highly unlikely that she was directly involved in the abduction or murder, they do not rule out the possibility that she may have been aware of her husband's actions and provided a false alibi to help him. If she had been directly involved, experts would have likely found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. Additionally, Neregis' younger brother has raised suspicions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men, likely Neregis and his younger brother, standing near the barn and watching the employees. However, the younger brother's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. It is possible that the brothers were indeed observing the employees and discussing inappropriate topics, but only Neregis ultimately committed the crime. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and Robert were twins. As children, Cassandra and Robert liked to tell each other scary stories in a room with the lights off. Robert was a talented storyteller. Cassandra always found Robert's stories interesting. In every story, Robert played a small but brave man. In addition, Cassandra and Robert also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together. Although their mother, Mary Smith, did not share Cassandra's passion to instill in her children a love of reading, she bought them many books about scary stories. Loving horror stories was the passion of the 2 siblings. They even collected figurines of villains and, as adults, seriously considered opening a horror-themed bookstore. Not long after, Cassandra's interest in horror movies brought her to the studio in 2004. She got a cameo role in a scary movie that, although it did not become popular, still made Robert envious of Cassandra. Robert began asking Cassandra to make him a deal. Robert asked Cassandra to give him a role in the movie she was filming. Cassandra readily agreed. Robert was happy, but he couldn't play even a supporting role in a soap opera. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, who had a crush on Cassandra since her first days in the movie. At the company Halloween party, Cassandra dressed as Velma from Scooby-Doo and Colin dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. During the party, Colin walked around with a glass of milk all evening, glaring at everyone, just like his character did in the movie, and he also said a lot of quotes from the book. Finally, he stopped in front of Cassandra and said that her beauty made Colin want to destroy it. Cassandra thought it was a compliment and they quickly started dating. But their relationship didn't last long, only a few months. Colin found another actress named Rebecca and began dating her, after which Colin and Rebecca began living together. One day, on August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cannell suddenly disappeared. When her mother, Mary Smith, tried to contact her, she did not answer the phone. Mary went to report the incident to the police, and a search was quickly launched. After several days of searching, police found her car under the bridge. Also, the bad news was that the car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. There was no reason for Cassandra to appear here. This place was considered a homeless shelter where violence often occurred. Officers had to go through the neighborhood questioning many homeless people. But none of them had ever seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car appeared here. The detective participating in the search for Cassandra requested to locate Cassandra's cell phone. The signal showed the phone was in the water closest to the bridge, which meant detectives wouldn't be able to recover it and couldn't get the information they needed. To search more closely, a team of divers was about to search the coastal area for Cassandra. Before starting, they stood on the shore, picked up rocks, and threw them into the water to gauge the distance they could throw. Cassandra's mother mentioned that Cassandra's phone case had rhinestones, making it easy to spot. The phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not. Mary expressed her grief, saying she had looked forward to being a grandmother soon and hadn't even had time to set up a crib for her expected grandchild, which was still in its box in the garage. She wondered what to do with it now, unknowingly providing important information for the investigation. According to statistics, many crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith did not know who Cassandra's boyfriend was. Cassandra was not married and didn't seem to be in a relationship, yet she was pregnant. Mary had no information about him, despite knowing that Cassandra often spoke to someone on the phone. However, the phone number was not saved in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't recall the number. It's common for girls to confide in at least one friend about their relationships, especially when it comes to something as significant as pregnancy. The police found such a friend, who revealed that Cassandra had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley. They had a brief relationship in 2004, but it was surprising that they rekindled their romance 15 years after breaking up. When Cassandra discovered she had been pregnant, she had hesitated to inform Colin. She had recalled an earlier conversation where he had expressed his disdain for having children, even expressing relief that his wife Rebecca had been infertile. Fearing a child would disrupt her relationship with Colin, Cassandra had kept her secret hidden. However, as her pregnancy had progressed, it had become more and more difficult to hide underneath the oversized clothes. To avoid arousing suspicion, Cassandra had stopped seeing Colin, even though she had known she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. Cassandra decided it had been best to be honest with Colin. So she had told him over the phone that she had been pregnant with his child. Colin had been silent for a moment before replying that he had been happy about the news. Although his tone had seemed a bit off, Cassandra had believed he had truly felt happy. A detective visited Colin's house and knocked on the door. However, the person who had opened the door had been Rebecca, a detective who introduced herself as Colin's old friend and had asked to meet Colin. Without hesitation, Colin had stepped out from behind Rebecca, closed the door behind him, and walked out of the house with the detective. It had seemed like Colin had been expecting this conversation, even though the detective had yet to formally introduce himself. Colin told the detective that he appreciated the detectives for not revealing any information in front of Rebecca. Colin mentioned that he had heard about Cassandra's disappearance and found it strange, and said that he didn't know where she had gone. He explained that Cassandra had told him about a big argument with her brother, Robert. Colin had advised Cassandra to reconcile with Robert but was unsure whether she would take his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and Robert, as Colin had explained to the detective that it had been just a small family misunderstanding, even though Robert had been extremely upset about it. On the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called Colin and said she wanted to talk, but he had refused because of his ego. Now, Colin blamed himself for her disappearance, believing that if he had met her that day, she might not have disappeared. Colin admitted to the detective that he had not been the nicest person, that he had been secretly dating Cassandra behind Rebecca's back for a long time, and expressed his belief that he would probably be punished for it in the other world. Colin also shared that when his father had passed away in 2014, he had a deep hatred for Rebecca. Rebecca often clashed with her father Colin, accusing him of not understanding her. However, sometimes it turned out that it was actually Rebecca who didn't understand her father. After Colin's father had passed away, Colin had wanted to fulfill one of his wishes. His father had been right about some things, and Colin decided to rekindle his relationship with Cassandra. This meant Colin had to end things with Rebecca. Therefore, for 5 years, Colin had lived a double life, which was extremely difficult. Colin constantly made excuses to come home late, telling Rebecca about fake business trips. Colin even bought a fishing rod even though he didn't like fishing. Colin would tell Rebecca that he was going to the lake when in reality he was visiting Cassandra. To make his lie more believable, he bought fish from the supermarket and Rebecca would cook it, despite the fact that the smell of fish made him sick. Things took a surprising turn when Colin discovered that Cassandra was pregnant. Colin did not know who the father was, but Cassandra had confided in a close friend that it was Colin. Colin found this hard to believe. She wanted to have a family of her own with Colin, but this was something Colin could not provide for her. Colin assumed she had found someone else, and he assumed that was why Cassandra didn't want to see him anymore. The detective asked Colin when was the last time he had seen her. Colin honestly replied that he didn't remember, but it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. Colin said that he had run into Cassandra at the mall, but only briefly because Rebecca was trying on clothes, and he had gotten tired of waiting so he walked to the coffee shop. Colin asked the police officer one last time if they had any chance of finding Cassandra alive. The detective replied that they were doing everything they could and asked Colin to believe him. This was not the last time Colin saw the detective. Although Cassandra's phone was unusable, police had obtained her call records. It turned out that the person Cassandra had been calling frequently was Colin Dudley. Cassandra had called him often, even on the day she went missing. Police also received CCTV footage from the railway station near where Cassandra's abandoned car was found. The video showed a suspicious man standing out among passengers on the platform. He was wearing a long coat, gloves, and a scarf covering his face. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his eyes, making it impossible for police to see his face clearly. However, the detective noted that the man's gait reminded him of Colin Dudley. The hat was similar to the one Colin had worn at the party playing a character in the movie A Clockwork Orange. After tracking the suspect via CCTV, detectives observed him briefly entering a coffee shop, only to leave a few minutes later and head towards the parking lot. There, he got into his car and drove away. Even though his face was obscured the entire time, detectives were still able to write down the license plate number. A search warrant was then issued and a unit was dispatched to Colin Dudley's residence. During the search of Colin's home, detectives hoped that Cassandra was still alive. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house. However, in the wardrobe they find the hat that Colin had tried to hide. They then found a basement in his house. When the police went to the basement, they did not find Cassandra there and there was no evidence of a crime. However, the dog detected the smell of blood, became agitated and barked continuously. Colin insisted he did nothing illegal, claiming that the police had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to frame him, and he claimed to be an innocent man. In search of more information, detectives interviewed Rebecca, who was shocked by the surprise search, the allegations against her husband, and the fact that she had been deceived for years. She said many things about Colin and her feelings, but when the detective asked if her husband was capable of murder, she thought for a long time and then answered no. The evidence against Colin was not enough to send him to prison, which angered Robert and Mary Smith. Later, Colin was called in again for questioning. This time, Colin claimed that he had an alibi to counter the charges against him. He said that at 6:30 a.m. on August 25th, he went to a hardware store and bought household cleaning chemicals and trash bags. The store's cameras confirmed this, but the purchase of large trash bags raised suspicions. In addition, Colin received a text message from Cassandra, saying that Cassandra was coming to his house. Colin immediately deleted the message, but it was still stored in the mobile carrier's memory. The police took it from calls and text messages. According to cell phone signals, Colin and Cassandra had not left the house for several hours that morning. Colin turned off his phone but left Cassandra's phone on, possibly accidentally. As a result, police were able to track his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. Police suspect Colin may have used the cafe to clean up after the murder and wash up in the toilet. Colin drove to where he had discarded Cassandra's phone, which was the last location of Cassandra's cell phone signal. The police need to find Cassandra's body and seize the GPS tracking device on Colin's car to accurately track his route. This device provided new evidence in the case. Following Colin's trail the previous day, the police discovered a large trash can tied with a rope in a ravine in the forest. The ground around the bag was covered in blood, and it was clear to see what was inside. The case happened a month ago, so identifying the body was difficult. However, police were able to identify Cassandra's body thanks to a tattoo described in the search notes. Colin was arrested the same day and charged with murder. Forensic examination revealed that Cassandra's death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the trial, the police presented Colin Dudley's motive for committing the crime. However, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, including the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that Colin was guilty. To resolve the case, the court offered Colin a plea deal stating that if he pleaded guilty, he would receive a reduced sentence. Colin accepted the deal and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were deeply saddened by the outcome, as they still grappled with feelings of guilt for not having met Cassandra before her death. They are especially worried about the fact that Colin may one day be released from prison, free to live the rest of his life regardless of the crimes he has committed against their family. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, where he spent his early years. At the age of 20, he decided to serve his country and joined the military. Christopher committed himself to protecting the peace and safety of his fellow citizens. Christopher was stationed at a military base near Marquette, where he met Terry O'Donnell, a young teacher from Iron River. They lived in the same area and would often see each other around town as they spent more time together. They remained close friends for many years, but Christopher eventually decided to leave the military and move to Traverse City. Despite the distance between them, they continued to communicate regularly, and in December 2012, Christopher asked Terry to take their relationship to the next level. Terry and Christopher have known each other for many years. They find they have a lot in common. They decide to live together. Terry and Christopher choose Iron River as the perfect place for them to settle down. Christopher finds a job at a factory that makes parts for military ships, where he becomes a supervisor. However, after 2 years of living together, problems began to arise in their relationship. Unfortunately, they didn't make an effort to work through their issues, and it became clear that their relationship was coming to an end. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to go their separate ways. Despite the breakup, they were able to part on good terms and remain friends. After breaking up with Terry, Christopher realized that he couldn't live in her house anymore, so he decided to rent his own house. He felt that the town he lived in was too small, and he wanted a more dynamic city. Christopher began applying for jobs in various locations, sending out his resume in search of a new job. In October 2014, Christopher found a job in Asheville, North Carolina. As Christopher settled into his new life in Asheville, he contacted Terry on October 14th, telling her that he would be taking the day off tomorrow and looking forward to meeting Terry for a walk. However, on October 15th, Christopher did not contact Terry as planned. Terry became worried and tried calling him for several days, but he did not answer. She even contacted their mutual friends. 10 days after Christopher went missing, Terry filed a police report. The police accepted the report and told Terry that Christopher had probably moved to a new job in North Carolina and that he had started a new life and wanted to contact old friends. To avoid speculation, investigators conducted a thorough investigation. They identified Christopher's new workplace and contacted an employee to gather information. However, surprisingly, they found out that Christopher had not shown up to work in 10 days. The police then suspected that he might have been involved in an accident, given his frequent solo outdoor trips. The search for Christopher led investigators to the local woods, where he was known to frequent. Trained search dogs were brought in to aid in the effort. But no signs of Christopher were found. Terry, concerned that Christopher may have been injured or in an accident, suggested searching his former apartment. The investigators agreed and visited the apartment, where they were met with a scene of disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor, and closets were left open. Initially, they thought that Christopher might have simply been messy, but Terry disputed this, stating that Christopher was typically neat and organized. The detectives started to suspect a connection between the recent events and the crime. After investigating Christopher's home, they decided to expand their search. A thorough search of the neighborhood led them to find Christopher's car 8 miles outside Iron River, near the city limits. The police found it unusual that the car was left there, suggesting it might have been abandoned unintentionally. After forcing open a door, they searched the interior and found nothing suspicious, only ordinary clothing. However, one of the officers noticed a small yellow piece of paper on the front passenger seat with a detailed route written on it. They decided to follow the route to see where it led. Although the paper did not specify an exact address, the directions were clear. According to Terry, Christopher, although familiar with the city of Iron River, did not know the local street names, so he wrote down the directions using landmarks such as bus stops and gas stations. Terry deduced from the detailed notes that this was Christopher's first time visiting the location. The detectives followed the route outlined on the paper, which led them to a nearby town and a specific house mentioned in Christopher's notes. When they arrived, they knocked on the door to gather information and Christopher's connection to the location. A man named Jason Cochran answered the door, and his wife Kelly was there. The police explained that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and had found a lead pointing to this address. Terry, who worked with Christopher at the same factory, revealed that they were co-workers. She had tried to contact Christopher via text message in mid-October but had not received a response. Investigators found a note in Christopher's car that showed the route to Jason's house. Although confused, Jason and Kelly agreed to cooperate with the investigation. After a short interrogation without any further clues, the detectives left Jason Cochran's house. Detectives then interviewed Christopher's co-workers at the factory. A supervisor shared that Christopher had been having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which was an open secret among employees. This revelation sparked interest, leading investigators to re-question Jason and Kelly. During re-interrogation, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher. However, she claimed that she could not reveal this information earlier because her husband Jason was present. According to Kelly, Jason agreed to her affair. However, Christopher's colleagues disputed Kelly's story. They claimed that Jason did not approve of Kelly's affair. When Jason was later brought in for questioning, he completely denied approving of Kelly's affair. His strong objection to Kelly's infidelity aroused suspicion and made him a suspect. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance was ongoing, but the lack of concrete evidence made it impossible to determine whether Kelly was involved. As a result, Kelly and Jason were released from the police station. The case remained unsolved for 5 months. In March 2015, a new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden from the Hobart Police Department, took over the case. Jeremy Ogden began by thoroughly examining the Jason Cochran family's background. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together soon after graduation. They had distinct personalities. Kelly was outgoing, sociable, and talkative, while Jason was quiet and reserved. He rarely initiated conversations, only responding to questions asked of him. Despite their differences, they decided to get married. After the wedding, they started a business together, providing swimming pool maintenance services. The business was modest, but it provided a decent income for they. Jason handled most of the pool maintenance work, but the constant stress and physical strain took a toll on his health. He began to experience back problems and felt increasingly heavier every day. Eventually, he realized he could no longer continue running the business. Kelly then took over the responsibilities of running the business, hoping that Jason would soon recover and return to his duties. However, his condition continued to worsen, and medical treatments were not providing the desired relief. Kelly searched for alternative ways to help her husband recover. During her search, Kelly discovered a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. However, the plant was banned in their home state, making it inaccessible to them. To access the treatment, Kelly and Jason decided to relocate to Michigan, specifically Iron River Township, in 2014. Jason consulted his doctor and received a prescription for pain medication. Around the same time, in early 2014, Jason's wife, Kelly Cochran, started working at a factory that manufactured parts for U.S. warships. Kelly and Jason moved to the area. Kelly and Jason worked at the same factory where Christopher Reagan worked. Christopher and Kelly found common topics of conversation and over time became close friends. This friendship was especially important to Christopher. After gathering evidence, prosecutors presented their case to a Michigan judge to obtain a search warrant for Kelly and Jason's home. The judge granted the warrant, and on March 6, a team of investigators searched Kelly and Jason's home, carefully searching for any evidence related to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant discovery was a book written by Jason. He used a pseudonym in the world of video games. The title of the work was ordinary, but its content was horrifying. In this dark and violent book, Jason described the murder of the person who had harmed him. After reading the book, the detectives noticed a character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Christopher. This raised suspicions about Jason, leading them to wonder if he had been inspired by the real-life crimes he had committed. 3 weeks later, a second search of Jason's home was conducted. The police hoped to find crucial evidence that had been missed in the first search. However, when they arrived at the Jason's home, they found it empty, with no cars in sight. Repeated attempts to knock on the door went unanswered. It was later discovered that Kelly and Jason had fled the state shortly after the initial search, moving to Indiana. Their sudden departure left investigators concerned. Michigan police, needing a DNA sample, asked Indiana police for help. Indiana police went to Jason's new home, where they had just moved. The investigation into Christopher Reagan's disappearance ran out of clues. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Hobart, Indiana, police received a frantic call from Kelly Cochran, who tried to explain that her husband, Jason, was not breathing. When paramedics arrived, Kelly was in a panic. It was clear that Jason was beyond saving. He was sitting in a chair, his face burning like fire, as if he had overheated. The doctors officially confirmed Jason's death. His body was then sent for a thorough forensic examination. Meanwhile, Kelly was handed over to a police patrol and taken to relatives who lived nearby. To piece together what happened, investigators thoroughly searched the Jason's new home. During the search, a police officer found a syringe at the foot of Jason in his wife's bed. Initially, investigators believed Jason's death was due to substance abuse. The medical examiner's report showed that Jason had multiple drugs in his system, but Jason's death was due to strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. The focus of the investigation then shifted to Kelly Cochran, who appeared to be connected to both crimes. She was now considered the prime suspect in not only Christopher's disappearance but also her husband's murder. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was summoned to the police station to answer questions about her husband's death. Under direct questioning and pressure from investigators, Kelly denied any involvement in her husband's death and Christopher's disappearance. She claimed that Jason's death was due to a drug overdose. Months later, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to convict Kelly. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's. Kelly informed Walter of Jason's death, who then contacted the police. Walter shared his insights with investigators, saying he did not believe Jason's death was caused by drugs. He claimed that Jason had used herbs to relieve his chronic back pain. In March of the previous year, Jason confided in Walter about his concerns. Jason and Kelly were asked to go to Indiana because the Iron River police suspected them of being involved in Christopher's disappearance. This had a significant impact on Jason, leading to depression. Walter observed a notable change in Jason's behavior, with Kelly increasingly taking control over his life. Jason appeared to be constantly anxious, and he began to avoid social gatherings as soon as Kelly returned from work. As the investigation progressed, this information became a vital link. After the medical examiner determined that Jason had died from strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to pressure Kelly into revealing the truth about Jason's death. Walter, Jason's friend, was used as bait to lure Kelly into a trap. On March 12, 2016, Walter, under police surveillance and equipped with a listening device, called Kelly. He told her that Jason had given him a letter containing important information before his death, with the condition that it be sent to the police if anything happened to him. However, Kelly surprisingly asked Walter to drop the idea, which caught both Walter and the police off guard. Despite this development, the detective still lacked direct evidence to build a case. In the weeks following her initial questioning, Kelly was subjected to multiple interrogations by investigators trying to uncover the truth. Despite their efforts, she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, on April 26, 2016, it became apparent that Kelly Cochran had evaded the scrutiny of investigators and was on the loose. Detectives joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart to launch a federal manhunt for Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and frightened by the news. He feared that Kelly might never be caught and could potentially harm him again. As the search for Kelly intensified, her phone went off, leading investigators to believe she was deliberately concealing her location. Kelly evaded police and fled to Wingo, Kentucky, over 6 hours away from Hobart. A detective notified the local authorities to exercise extreme caution if they found Kelly. Police in Wingo identified Kelly at her cousin's house on April 28. Understanding that she posed a potential danger and was prone to attempting to escape, officers rapidly proceeded to the residence, avoiding advance warnings that afternoon and detaining Kelly on site. During the interview, Kelly revealed new details. That Kelly was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to leave the city life behind to start over with him. On October 13, 2015, Jason discovered Kelly's infidelity. Jason made a dark pact. The adulterer was obliged to kill his lover if the affair was exposed. Kelly claimed she had never taken this pact seriously, thinking it was just a joke. However, Jason was resolute and warned Kelly that if she didn't fulfill her end of the bargain, he would take matters into his own hands. Despite her reservations, Kelly reluctantly helped Jason commit a heinous crime. The next evening, October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house, eager to spend a romantic evening with Christopher while her husband was away. Kelly had planned a fun evening, complete with dinner and intimacy. Kelly and Christopher had dinner together and then went upstairs to the house. Then Jason suddenly appeared. Jason rushed into the bedroom, holding a rifle. Christopher immediately realized that he was in danger. Without hesitation, Jason shot Christopher in the head, killing him. Jason and Kelly then dragged the body down to the basement, where they began to dismember it with a hacksaw. Jason and Kelly cut Christopher's limbs and head off his body and placed the remains in several garbage bags. They then dumped the bags in the woods near Crystal Falls. To avoid suspicion, they drove Christopher's car away from the house. Kelly and Jason thoroughly cleaned the house to remove any evidence of the crime. Kelly was consumed by a deep-seated anger towards her husband, whom she blamed for ruining her chance at happiness with he she truly loved, Christopher. She couldn't forgive her husband for depriving her of the opportunity to be with him, and the pain and loss she felt lingered every day. Kelly's resentment towards her husband eventually turned to hatred, and she knew she could no longer live peacefully with him. An opportunity for revenge presented itself on February 22, 2016, when her husband complained of back pain. Kelly convinced him to let her give her an injection, but she deliberately gave him a dose that killed him. However, the medication didn't work as planned, and her husband was still breathing. Kelly then suffocated him by covering his mouth and nose with her hands. To ensure he was dead, she also squeezed his neck, which explained the bruises found on his body. After confessing to the crime, Kelly cooperated with the police to help them locate Christopher's remains. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden led a team to a remote area near Crystal Falls to search for Christopher's body. A canine unit picked up the scent and led the team to a small hill, where they found a human skull with bullet holes, indicating a homicide. The team believed they had discovered Christopher's remains. Further examination of the scene yielded additional evidence, including a .22 caliber bullet, a broken firearm. Dental records later confirmed the victim's identity. This breakthrough finally solved the case that had haunted investigators for 2 years. Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher and Jason Cochran in April 2016. On February 13, 2017, Kelly was brought to court in Michigan to face charges. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind the crime and that she had planned and executed. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including Kelly's own confession, to support their case. However, Kelly told a different story. She claimed that her husband, Jason, was the one who had planned and committed the crime. According to Kelly, Jason was jealous and had been abusing her. On the day of the crime, Jason allegedly hid in the basement and surprised Kelly and Christopher, then shot Christopher in a fit of rage. Kelly also claimed that Jason had forced her to help him dismember the body by threatening to harm her. Despite Kelly's new version of events, the jury found her guilty of premeditated murder after deliberating for 3 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After being sentenced, Kelly Cochran was sent directly to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan, where she is currently serving her sentence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheil Kovlin. Sheil Kovlin grew up on the west side of Manhattan. Shelley's life was marked by a love of learning and academic excellence, earning a degree in wealth management. This degree opened the door to a successful career in Swiss banking. Sheil's career flourished, and she became skilled at managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. However, despite her professional success and financial security, Sheil felt unfulfilled. She longed to start a family of her own and become a mother. In an effort to change her circumstances, Sheil attended a Jewish singles event in February 1998, where she met a 26-year-old man named Rod Kovlin, who also worked in the banking sector. Sheil and Rod were a young couple with many similar interests and ambitions. Their relationship developed quickly despite their significant age difference. They spent all their time together and then decided to get married, feeling that everything was just right. Some people thought they were rushing into marriage, but for Sheil and Rod, it was perfect. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and their family was complete. However, their happy life was shattered on New Year's Eve 2009 when Shiel died in a tragic accident. At first, the police thought it was just a freak accident. On December 30th, 2009, two police officers were finishing their night shift at a Manhattan police station. They received an emergency call from Rod Coughlin, Shiel's husband, who had called in a panic to report that he had found Shiel in her bathtub, submerged in blood, and that she was dead. He followed the police's instructions to pull her out of the water and attempt to resuscitate her. However, it soon became clear that his efforts to save her life would not be successful. As Shiel's body was cold and motionless, Rod Coughlin covered her with a blanket and waited for the police to arrive. Police quickly arrived and investigated the scene. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and blocked off a downtown Manhattan street. Initially, officers suspected that Shiel's death may have been a suicide. Inside the apartment, the police found scattered children's toys. Proceeding to the bathroom, they discovered the Shiel wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod Coughlin had recently pulled the body from the water. A bleeding wound on the back of Shiel's head was visible. Police found a torn hinge on the cabinet in the bathroom where Shiel died, suggesting she fell after losing her grip on the doorknob. Experts concluded there was no forced entry after checking around the house. The detective working the case decided to talk to the family members. During the interview, it was discovered that Shiel and Rod Coughlin's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she saw, she told the police what had happened. It turned out that the night before, she and her younger brother had slept in their mother's bed. Waking up in the middle of the night and realizing that her mother was not there, she went looking for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. She quickly called her father, Rod Coughlin, who had recently separated from his mother and was downstairs. He rushed into the bathroom, pulled his wife's body out of the water, and called emergency services. Her account of the events matched Rod Coughlin's, supporting the theory that her death was an accident. The police informed Shiel's family of the tragic event, leaving everyone in shock. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day. When the medical examiner contacted investigators to begin the examination, he was surprised to learn that this procedure would not take place, despite being necessary. This left the examiner confused. It was later discovered that a rabbi from Shiel's synagogue had intervened. The rabbi contacted an organization responsible for burying Orthodox Jews, who then asked the police for permission to enter the scene in accordance with the family's religious rites. The police granted permission and a team of rabbis arrived at the scene. They cleaned up the blood in the bathtub and prepared Shiel's body for burial, in accordance with the family's beliefs. Unfortunately, this process destroyed all evidence and clues before they could be examined by the police forensic department. Orthodox Jewish tradition considers autopsies unacceptable because they involve defiling the body of the deceased. The rabbi quickly stepped in to support Shiel's grieving family, who were grateful for the rabbi's help. As a result, the family agreed to forego an autopsy and organize funeral arrangements. Shiel was buried within 24 hours, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects. Shiel's parents questioned the cause of Shiel's death. Police told them that potential evidence had been destroyed during the cleanup. They thought that a fall in the bathtub would certainly have caused the accident. But the possibility of death from such an accident seemed unlikely. The family hired a private investigator to investigate the circumstances of her death and determine whether it was indeed an accident. The private investigator begins by going to the family home to talk to Shiel's relatives, and learns that Shiel's marriage to Rod Coughlin is having major problems. Their marriage began to fall apart after their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008. Rod Coughlin frequently changed jobs and developed a gambling addiction, spending a lot of money on gambling. Sheil felt neglected because Rod Coughlin spent a lot of time playing video games. Sheil was also frustrated by the amount of money Rod Coughlin's family spent on his frequent trips, and he was unfaithful to her. Sheil, after discovering his email cheating, she decided to end their marriage and began the process of getting a religious divorce. However, the formal divorce process will take some time to complete. Although they are separated and experiencing strain in their relationship, they has tried to maintain their relationship for the sake of their children. Despite this effort, conflicts and disagreements between Sheil and Rod Coughlin continue to arise. Sheil had recently confided in her loved ones about her grievances with Rod Coughlin, characterizing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt uneasy and monitored. The private detective suspected that Rod Coughlin might have been involved in his wife Sheil's death due to the complexities in their marital life. To investigate further, the detective aimed to determine if a crime had occurred at the scene where Sheil's body was found. He planned to inspect her apartment, but the door was sealed, requiring him to obtain a court order to gain access. Upon arriving at the scene with New York police officers, the detective attempted to unlock the door with a provided key, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Rod Coughlin appeared from his apartment, claiming he had heard a noise and came to investigate. When questioned by the police and the detective, Rod Coughlin took the key and easily opened the door. This raised suspicions. Had Rod Coughlin genuinely heard a noise, or was he deliberately keeping an eye on the situation? The detective searched the apartment for evidence of murder. Sheil's family said she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. A phone charger was found, but not the phone that he paid particular attention to the hinges, which investigators believed she had ripped off during a fall. The more he examined them, the more he suspected that, with Sheil's strength, ripping off hinges that were firmly attached to the cabinet was impossible. The detective discussed his findings with the police, trying to convince them that Sheil's death was not an accident, but a murder. However, the police remained unconvinced, citing a lack of evidence. Therefore, they decided to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This decision caused a difficult debate with Sheil's family. The exhumation took place 2 weeks after Sheil had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply distressed by the decision. In the Jewish faith, exhumation is considered negative and many religious leaders oppose the practice. The family needed time to think about their next steps. They felt the need to find out the truth about their daughter's death, so they agreed to exhume her body. However, the exhumation process was difficult, so the family had to apply for a special order from the prosecutor's office. Even with the family's consent, they still had to make sure that all the necessary paperwork was completed. Once all the paperwork was completed, they proceeded with the exhumation and autopsy. The autopsy results showed that Sheil did not die from a fall, but from strangulation, which caused her to suffocate and break her neck. The official cause of Sheil's death was revised, and it was no longer considered an accident. Instead, it was officially ruled a murder. The detective's suspicions and efforts were vindicated. The autopsy results were instrumental in prompting the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation into Sheil's death. Detectives began scrutinizing new evidence, including phone records and bank statements. They also interviewed everyone who had interacted with Rod Coughlin and Sheil. The attorney shared information about Rod Coughlin and Sheil during the first divorce hearing in May 2009. Rod Coughlin claimed that he could not afford the money because he was unemployed, but the judge said that he had to give up gambling and electronics. In court, Rod Coughlin's true nature was exposed, and he continued to criticize Sheil, making false accusations about her lifestyle, finances, and behavior toward their son. He even called Sheil's workplace to defame her. In the subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, the court banned Rod Coughlin from spending time alone with the children, a ban that remained in place even after Sheil's death. The court also denied Rod Coughlin custody of the children and awarded custody to Rod Coughlin's parents through a social worker. This decision likely angered Rod Coughlin greatly. Police interviewed a former caregiver who had cared for Rod Coughlin's children before he fired her. It was discovered that on December 30th, Schill had received an expensive keratin hair treatment that cost hundreds of dollars. The care instructions emphasized avoiding humidity in high temperatures for several days, essentially prohibiting baths or showers. Schill's autopsy revealed no signs of bathing on the day of her death, leading investigators to speculate that she may not have taken a bath. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building, which showed Rod Coughlin leaving his apartment at 4 a.m. on the day of the murder, dressed to go out. He returned a short time later. The building's security guard found this unusual, as Rod had never left the building that early. The security guard asked Rod Coughlin if he needed anything, but when he said no, Rod Coughlin returned with the chocolate bars and gave them to the security guard. Investigators believed that Rod Coughlin's actions were intentional to create an alibi, and as a result, he became the prime suspect. Schill and Rod Coughlin were still married, which meant that absent a will or divorce, Rod Coughlin would inherit her estate, which was worth over $5 million. Additionally, on December 31, 2009, Schill scheduled a meeting with her attorney to update her will and remove Rod Coughlin from the list of beneficiaries, which posed a significant threat to Rod Coughlin's rights and provided a clear motive for the crime. All of Schill's assets were frozen in a safe deposit account. It is likely that Rod Coughlin knew about Schill's plans to remove his name from her will, as he may have been monitoring her activities. A review of the surveillance footage revealed that Schill had returned home at 8 p.m. the night before the crime, talking on her phone. However, the phone had gone missing after the crime. The investigators decided to conduct another search of the crime scene, and upon returning to the apartment, they quickly found Schill's mobile phone lying on her bedside table, still connected to the charger. When questioned by the police, Rod Coughlin hired a lawyer, Ed, who advised him to remain silent. As a result, investigators had to continue searching for new evidence implicating Rod Coughlin. When they examined Rod Coughlin's phone records, they discovered frequent calls to the number of Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. 5 months before Schill's murder, Rod Coughlin and Deborah met at a sick bow tournament and began a passionate affair. They often met at sick bow tournaments or played together online. Investigators saw an opportunity to gather information and decided to contact Deborah with a few questions. However, to their surprise, Deborah responded that her attorney had asked her not to cooperate. Faced with Deborah's refusal to speak, the police asked for the name of her attorney. The response revealed that Deborah and Rod Coughlin were the same attorney. As a last resort, the police searched Schill's newly discovered phone for incriminating text messages or electronic communications between Rod and Deborah. All data had been completely erased by a professional. Even skilled programmers were unable to recover the deleted messages. Over time, it became clear that he had succeeded in evading justice. While his crimes may have been well executed, the rabbi's meticulous cleaning of the bathroom was a major factor in hampering the investigation. By removing all traces of blood and other evidence, they destroyed DNA, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to collect evidence. The case stalled because Rod Coughlin confessed to the crime, and a lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years have passed since the investigation into Schill's death began, but no arrests have been made. Police have searched for clues and evidence of Rod Coughlin's involvement in Schill's death for years, but to no avail. However, the case took a turn when Rod Coughlin's mistress, Deborah, came forward. She contacted the police, and they invited her to the station for questioning. Deborah had recently broken up with Rod Coughlin, which prompted her to contact the police. She shared information with the police that Rod Coughlin had conspired to gain custody of the children. but because he was a suspect in Shields' death and did not have custody of the children, he could not access the money Shield left behind. Rod Coughlin hatched a sinister plan to get his hands on Shields' fortune. Rod Coughlin planned to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into falsely accusing her grandfather, Rod Coughlin's father, of assaulting her. This would result in the grandfather being imprisoned and losing custody of his granddaughter, and Rod Coughlin would give his daughter a large sum of money upon completion of the mission. Meanwhile, Rod Coughlin had been secretly withdrawing funds from the only account he had access to, which was meant for his children's education. His parents discovered that he was misusing the money and were extremely unhappy with his lack of concern for his children's well-being. This led to a heated dispute between Rod Coughlin and his parents. Rod Coughlin's anger towards his parents escalated to the point where he considered harming them. In 2012, he confided in his lover, Deborah, about his plan to have his daughter poison his parents' tea with rat poison. He believed that since his daughter was a minor, she would receive a lighter sentence if caught. Following this, Rod Coughlin came up with several other schemes. He considered burning down his parents' house and trapping them inside by jamming the doors. Rod Coughlin also thought about arranging a fake marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would have forced her to give up part of her inheritance to him. The police were shocked by the details of Rod Coughlin's plans. Deborah secretly collected evidence, storing a large amount of data on hard drives. Deborah realized she was dealing with a psychopath, and she waited until after she broke up with Rod Coughlin to share the evidence with the police. The recordings she collected of Rod Coughlin's conversations with various people. The police now had to listen carefully to these recordings to find conclusive evidence. Deborah's contribution to the investigation was crucial. As the investigators analyzed the recordings, they made a surprising discovery. In a conversation with a friend he met through backgammon, Rod Coughlin casually mentioned that he had keys to Shields' apartment and could enter it at any time. Investigators found that Rod Coughlin was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the Shields' demise on her. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Coughlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Coughlin was arrested. Shields' family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. Rod Coughlin, while incarcerated, shared intimate details of his wife's murder with a fellow inmate. He even reenacted the strangulation, which matched the autopsy results. During the 7-week trial, the jury heard testimony about the heinous crimes he planned to commit, including murdering his wife, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was horrified by his cold-blooded nature. In March 2019, the court convicted Rod Coughlin of murdering his wife, Shields. Although there was no direct eyewitness, the overwhelming evidence led to a life imprisonment sentence. With the possibility of parole after 25 years, Rod Coughlin will no longer pose a threat to his family or the people of New York. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christy Lynn Mullins. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio, one of 6 children in a large family. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise and chaos of the city. In the summer of 1975, 14-year-old Christy spent most of her days socializing with friends and family, often going to the local neighborhood swimming pool. In late August, Christy babysat for a family friend on the evening of August 22nd. The next day, August 23rd, she woke up around noon and decided to go swimming to cool off. She invited her sister Kim to join her, and they went to the residential area. While Kim went swimming, Christy relaxed on a deck chair. A short time later, Kim went ashore and found Christy nowhere to be seen, but Kim decided not to look for her and instead stayed at the pool. Surprisingly, when Kim returned home, Christy was not there. Hours passed and Christy still hadn't come home. Kim became even more worried. She decided to look for Christy and ran into a neighbor who told her that the police had found the body of a young woman a few miles away, but they had not been able to identify it. Kim rushed home to tell her parents, who immediately called the police to report Christy missing. It was very likely that the body found belonged to Christy, so the police directed them to the morgue for identification. Although it was difficult to recognize the identity of the body due to the severely bruised face, Christy's mother eventually accepted that the body was Christy's, her beloved daughter, thanks to the birthmark on her leg. Police later explained to the family what had happened. It turned out that at about 2:30 p.m. that same day, a man reported finding a body in the woods behind the local shopping center. He, his wife, and son had gone there to buy toys, but before entering the store, their son wanted to take a walk on the trail behind the building. This path was a popular walking path leading to a river, and the area was famous for its beauty. Together with his parents, the son went for a walk on this trail. During their hike, they came across a disturbing scene about 10 yards down the trail. A man was kneeling on top of someone and repeatedly beating him with a wooden object. When he saw the family, he immediately ran away. The father rushed to the scene and found a seriously injured little girl covered in blood. His wife, who had medical training, checked the victim's pulse, but there was none. The father quickly went to a nearby shopping center and called the police from a store. He and his wife provided investigators with a detailed description of the suspect, who was a tall, slim young man with long black hair, wearing jeans shorts and boots, about 20 years old. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on their description and distributed it to patrol officers. However, the investigation of the crime scene yielded no results. The wooden object used as the murder weapon was found, but they discovered no other evidence linking the perpetrator. Notably, the victim's hands were tied with a telephone cord and her bikini top was pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were found next to her body. Despite these signs, forensic experts found no evidence that a sexual assault had occurred. Luckily, detectives were able to continue their investigation thanks to new information from Kim, who told them about a conversation between Christy and a friend, Carol. The police summoned Carol. Carol recounted to police a suspicious phone call she had received from a stranger claiming to be a local DJ. The man had called her to talk about a fake cheerleading competition at the state fair, which was supposedly being held behind the local shopping mall. He announced the event would start at 1:45 p.m. and had told Carol to wait for someone at the entrance to the forest trail. The police were skeptical about Carol's story, and when they dug deeper, they discovered many inconsistencies. According to Carol, she had originally planned to attend the event with her sister, but they had run into Christy and her sister on the way. Carol then invited Christy to join her and they left their sisters behind to go to the mall. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the woods, no one appeared and Carol claimed that she had gone to the shopping center to ask for the time. When she turned around, Christy was gone. The police investigation revealed that there had been no cheerleading competitions in town, casting doubt on the reason for Carol and Christy's trip to the woods. Police suspected that the mysterious phone call might have been a ruse to lure Carol into the woods, but they were unable to trace the call to identify the caller. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in Carol's story. She claimed to have met Christy and her sister on the street, but Kim said they had been at the pool and Carol had come to meet them there. Additionally, Christy's mother reported a strange conversation with Carol later that evening, which raised further suspicions. Carol apologized to Christy's mother and revealed that she had been the intended target of a murder involving two people. However, she quickly retracted her words and left. Christy's mother reported this to the police. The police questioned Carol again, but she denied making a statement and stuck to her original story. Carol was then given a polygraph test, which did not reveal any signs of deception when Carol answered key questions. As a result, investigators shifted focus away from Carol and pursued other leads. Police intensified their search for the killer 3 days after Christie's murder. A police officer patrolling the streets of Columbus spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to a sketch of Christie's killer. Patrol officers quickly called detectives to the scene and asked Jack to accompany them to the station for questioning. The man, Jack Carman, 25, agreed to go with them. However, the police soon realized that Jack was severely mentally disabled, with an IQ of about 50 points. Results based on many different tests. As a result, Jack had limited communication skills and could not read or write. He was cared for by a specialist medical facility and lived in a supervised apartment. Despite these challenges, detectives could not ignore the striking resemblance between Jack and the composite sketch of the suspect in Christie's case. The interrogation process was extremely difficult due to Jack's limited ability to understand and answer questions. Most of the time, he just answered with one word or stayed silent. The detectives began to question whether Jack was capable of fully understanding their questions. To improve the situation, they had to ask very simple and specific questions. After 6 hours of questioning, detectives were finally starting to get results. They were finally able to extract a confession from Jack. According to his testimony, on the day in question he had left his apartment, taken the bus to the shopping center and bought a shirt and pants. As Jack walked through the parking lot, he saw Christie sitting on a fence near the entrance to a wooded trail. He approached her, tied her up by tying her hands, and then dragged her into the woods where he carried out the assault. After the attack, Christie tried to run away, but Jack quickly caught up with her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and repeatedly hit her in the head. Jack then ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and boarded the bus. The next day, police took Jack to the forest where he allegedly committed the crime. There, he pointed out the exact spot and provided specific details that only the perpetrator would know, including the fact that the piece of wood used to strike the victim broke in half. Investigators also verified the testimony, asking the couple who found Christie to identify the person they had seen on the day of the incident. Both identified the man they had seen as Jack. As a result, Jack was charged with multiple offenses, including assault and murder. The prosecution chose to include it in the charges. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer negotiated a deal. In exchange for a life sentence, Jack would plead guilty before the judge, thereby avoiding execution. The case moved swiftly, with thousands of people following. Just 11 days after the murder, on September 3rd, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, after the trial, public opinion began to shift, and many people started to question Jack's guilt. As more details about his confession and his background emerged in the media, people began to wonder whether he was truly capable of committing such a heinous crime. Those who knew Jack found it hard to believe that he was capable of the crime. He was a passive, timid, and compliant person who would agree to anything if pushed hard enough. In the past, he had even taken the blame for something he didn't do, like the time he claimed responsibility for breaking a boiler at a charity center, when in fact someone else was to blame. This behavior raised doubts about his ability to make a genuine confession to the crime. His supporters felt that the police must have manipulated him into confessing by feeding him information and asking pressured questions. For instance, if the police asked him if he hit the victim with a piece of wood, and he answered yes, they could use that as a confession. However, this approach can be unreliable, especially considering Jack's tendency to confess to anything when under threat. Even the mention of the electric chair was enough to make him agree to whatever the detectives wanted. Furthermore, the police took Jack to the crime scene at the same time as the witnesses, a married couple who later identified him at the police station. This raised concerns that the witnesses had been biased, as they had already seen Jack and knew he was a suspect, despite the police's claims that they never crossed paths. There were several red flags surrounding Jack's alleged involvement in the crime. For instance, the police failed to locate the bus driver or any passengers who claimed to have seen Jack on his way to the city center, which contradicted his own statement. Moreover, multiple people at the charity organization building where Jack lived and worked said to have seen him at around 1:30 p.m. This created a major timing issue. Even if Jack had left immediately after being seen by these witnesses, the bus ride to the shopping center on the outskirts of town would have taken at least 40 minutes. Given the crime was committed at 1:50 p.m., it was logistically impossible for Jack to have made it on time. This cast serious doubts about Jack's guilt and raised suspicions that the police may have coerced his confession. Christie's parents, too, began questioning whether Jack was the true culprit. At the height of the controversy, approximately 70 individuals gathered in front of City Hall on September 9th to draw attention to the case and advocate for a comprehensive investigation. They established a public committee aimed at securing justice for Jack. As a result, Jack was assigned a new lawyer, who swiftly petitioned for a case review. After several months, a judge dismissed Jack's original confession and ordered a new trial, putting the onus on the prosecution to establish his guilt from the beginning. This marked a daunting challenge for the prosecution, making their case almost unviable. Norman Mills, Christie's father, began his own investigation while preparations for the new trial were underway. Dissatisfied with the way the detectives had worked, Norman took matters into his own hands. Immediately after the murder, Norman and several neighbors searched the area where Christie was found. They discovered a bloody pair of jean shorts and men's underwear in the woods. They turned the items over to the police, who had initially missed them. It was unclear whether these items were related to the case or if they had been examined for evidence. Jack's new trial began in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two tasks: first and foremost, to prove Jack's innocence and also to try to identify the real killer. In fact, they already had a pretty strong candidate for the role, who they considered to be the prime suspect. The man who found Christ's body along with his wife was Henry Newell, who was 25 years old at the time of the murder. At the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had amassed an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder, and during the trial, the list grew even longer. Initially, Henry attracted attention because of his criminal record. Beginning in his teenage years, he had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, serving 3 prison sentences. He had successfully escaped from prison twice before being captured and brought back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th sentence, this time for burning down a house to collect insurance money. Lawyers also reviewed evidence from Christ's case and found some very suspicious details in his testimony. Henry said he had found her body, ran over, and threw a bloody piece of wood aside. He explained this by saying that he was in a state of shock at the time. But acting like that still seemed odd. Why did he pick up the murder weapon and throw it from his body for no apparent reason? He also testified that he thought the girl was still alive, so he took off his shirt and pressed it to her face. This action also raised questions. Did he actually try to stop the bleeding, or was his shirt stained with blood during the murder, and he needed to justify it somehow? Jack's lawyer found a store clerk in the mall where Henry had run to call the police. She said he was not wearing a shirt but was wearing jean shorts, although by the time police arrived, he was wearing a different pair of pants. The employee also confirmed that Henry had a new bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When asked why she didn't immediately report this to the police, she said no one had asked her. The officers themselves should have noticed this bruising but ignored it. Henry also agreed to take a polygraph test, but he ended up vomiting right on the machine. Another witness was Henry's neighbor, who said that on the night of the murder, he had talked to Henry and noticed many new scratches on his hands. The man also mentioned seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that was the same color and shape as the cord used to tie the victim's hands. That's not all. the neighbor said that Henry had once told him a very strange story. He claimed to know Christ's 14-year-old friend Carol and that they had once swum naked together in the pool. This story shocked everyone involved in the case. It turned out that Henry was acquainted with Carol, who was also directly involved in the case. His wife, Pam, also testified in court, saying everything had happened exactly as they told police on the first day. They had gone to the mall, and their son wanted to go for a walk. They went into the woods and found the body. Pam added that up until that point, Henry had remained at home and only stepped outside for a few minutes to scare away neighborhood children who had begun throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also testified, saying she had never met Henry. She was also asked about her intentions in telling Christ's mother that things should not have escalated to this point, but Carol again claimed she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime. One of the most important moments of the trial was the showing of the entire recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became clear to everyone that Jack had simply been forced to confirm the detective's words that he had committed murder. Jack barely said anything and didn't seem to fully understand what the police wanted from him. But that was not the most important moment of the trial. On the fifth day, another unexpected witness appeared. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony truly shocked everyone following the case. Bobby revealed that that day, Henry had indeed gone out of the house to chase away the children who had thrown firecrackers into the yard. When Henry returned home, his shirt and sandals were missing, and Henry had scars on his hands and face. Bobby was told by his parents that they would be going to the shopping center, but when they arrived, they instead took him on a walk in the woods behind the center. Bobby claims he never asked to go for a walk, which contradicts what his parents initially said. During the walk, they found Henry's torn sandal and then Christy's body. Bobby's mother instructed him not to tell anyone about what he saw. At the trial, Bobby's grandmother testified about a disturbing comment made by Henry during Christy's farewell ceremony. After expressing her sadness about Christy's death, Henry replied, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, Henry's friend, came forward and said that Henry had confessed to him that he accidentally killed Christy. Although the evidence clearly pointed to Henry's involvement, the prosecutor surprisingly announced that they would not pursue a case against Henry. The prosecutor also claimed that the initial investigation was handled correctly, despite acknowledging that the police missed or ignored many clues from the beginning. The public was outraged by this decision, leading the prosecutor to change his mind 2 days later and agree to reopen the investigation into Christy's death. Christy's father refused to give up on seeking justice and filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but not because he believed Jack was involved in the murder. Rather, he hoped to gain access to the case files and gather more information. Unfortunately, this effort also proved unsuccessful. The case had remained stagnant until 2013, when Henry died of terminal cancer. Despite this, in the same year, former attorney John Aller became interested in the case and conducted his own investigation. He contacted all parties involved in gathering new information. Christy's relatives had provided John with a box of records that Christy's father had collected. After reviewing the records and talking to dozens of people, John believed that Henry was the culprit behind Christy's murder. John's investigation revealed that Carol had bought marijuana from Henry, which made him suspect that Henry was involved in the crime. This new discovery created a possible connection between Henry and Carol, which could explain why Carol brought Christy to the forest. One theory is that Carol planned to meet Henry in the forest to buy an illegal substance. It's possible that Carol invited Christy along, using the DJ story as a cover. A more sinister explanation suggests that Carol brought Christy to the forest at Henry's request, intending for him to harm her. However, Christy resisted, as evidenced by Henry's injuries, and he ultimately killed her. When John took over the case, Henry had passed away from cancer at the age of 63. However, John continued his work and released a book about Christie's murder. The release of the book sparked a new wave of interest, and Christie's relatives demanded that the investigation be reopened. Some of Henry's relatives also confirmed that Henry was the one who killed the girl. This led to the reopening of the murder investigation in May 2014. Detectives re-examined the evidence, interviewed dozens of people, and reassessed Henry's confession. They re-examined Christie's clothes and found traces of semen, but they were too small for DNA analysis. The investigation lasted until late 2015, when detectives announced that Henry was the one who had committed the crime. But because he had passed away, the case could not go to court. The investigation ended with the conclusion that Henry had left home, gone to the road behind the shopping center, seen Christie alone, and decided to assault her with a telephone cord, taking her deep into the woods. Henry had attacked Christie, injuring her. Then he killed her with a piece of wood. Returning home, Henry recounted the incident to his wife, and the two began to make plans to avoid punishment. For many years afterward, Carol never revealed the truth. Police later apologized to Christie's family for their careless handling of the incident. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Debbie Lynn Randall. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia, to a loving family with two older brothers. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother later married a man named Roy, who became Debbie's stepfather. The family lived in a small apartment building. Debbie was a cheerful and sociable child. On the evening of January 13, 1972, after dinner with her family, Debbie went to the laundromat to supervise the laundry. Debbie's home was just a short distance from the laundromat, so her mother wasn't overly concerned about her safety when she was sent to do the laundry. The original plan was for Debbie to go with her brother, but he was feeling unwell, so Debbie's mother sent her husband to pick up the laundry and Debbie went with her stepfather, holding a box of laundry detergent. At the laundromat, Roy put the clothes in two washing machines and left, leaving Debbie waiting for the cycle to finish. After the wash, Debbie had to walk home and ask someone to pick up her clean clothes because she couldn't carry them herself. However, when the laundry should have been finished and Debbie still hadn't returned, her mother began to feel uneasy. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat to look for Debbie, but she was nowhere to be found. The employee informed them that Debbie had left the laundromat some time ago and had not returned. The news worried her mother, who began searching the surrounding streets with Roy. As they walked, they discovered a suspicious scene. A short distance from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to a car, there was a spilled detergent. Since Debbie had brought a box of detergent with her, her mother suspected that it might be hers. Despite expanding their search to the entire parking lot and the surrounding area, they found no other sign of Debbie. Neighbors who knew the family joined in the search. Debbie's mother decided to call the police for help. The police investigated the parking lot and discovered their first clue: spilled laundry detergent just inches from a parked car, and on the car door, they found several clear fingerprints. The police found fresh fingerprints on the car that were located lower than the handle, which seemed unusual. They suspected that an unknown person might have grabbed the girl while touching the car at this spot. The officers collected the fingerprints and sent them to forensic experts for analysis. They also started searching for the car's owner to confirm whether the fingerprints belonged to them. With no other leads, the police began a thorough search of the area, looking for new clues or witnesses. The laundry worker reported that she did not see anything suspicious. Debbie had waited for the laundry to finish, then left the building with the detergent box. It is possible that she went home to ask someone to pick up her clothes. Police discovered the first key witness, 12-year-old Sandra, who said that as she and her friend walked to a laundromat to drop off dirty clothes, they saw a man grab a girl on the street, drag her to his car parked near the laundromat, and drive away quickly while she screamed for help. Sandra and her friend were lucky to avoid the man's car. Debbie screamed in a car, but he did not slow down. At the time, Sandra did not consider what she saw to be a kidnapping. She assumed the man was a family member who had come to pick Debbie up, possibly against her will. So Sandra did not report the incident to the authorities or tell any adults about it. After learning about Debbie's disappearance, Sandra provided essential details to investigators. She described the abductor's vehicle as a dark-colored, likely 1957 model pickup truck. She also described the man as young, white, with thick dark hair, wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another key witness, a girl who lived in the same building as Debbie, shared her observations. She saw a dark-colored pickup truck drive past the apartment building on the evening in question. The girl initially thought the driver of the car was her uncle, but when he stopped in front of her and looked at her, she realized it was someone else. She described the driver as a white man with medium-length dark hair and provided additional details about his appearance. She also reported that he parked his car near their building, next to the same car where a detergent spill would later be discovered. Another witness, a man who lived near the girl's home, reported that a dark-colored pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, almost hit him while he was driving to visit his wife in the hospital. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair, and the witness saw a girl in the car trying to escape while the driver held her with one arm. Based on these accounts, the police believed Debbie had been kidnapped. They circulated the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units and created a composite sketch of the driver based on descriptions from witnesses. Some officers searched for similar vehicles and checked their owners, while others conducted a wide-ranging search for the girl. As the days passed, more volunteers and police from surrounding towns joined the search. Police questioned Debbie's family, and after investigation, they were all cleared as potential suspects. Debbie's biological father, who lived in the same city, was notified of her disappearance at work and immediately joined the search effort. Police also ran background checks on convicted criminals who lived near Debbie's home, but none of them appeared to be viable suspects. The search for Debbie continued for over 2 weeks without any significant leads. It wasn't until January 29th, when a group of students joined the search teams, that a breakthrough occurred. The students were sent to search a wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After nearly 5 hours of searching, one of the students noticed a set of tracks on the ground that led from the trail into the forest, suggesting that something had been dragged into the woods. As they followed the trail about 150 feet into the woods, they discovered a human body and immediately contacted the police. Upon further inspection, they quickly identified the body as Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same outfit her mother had described on the day she went missing. However, her shoes were missing. The medical examination of the Debbie's body revealed that she had been strangled to death and had also been sexually assaulted. A single dark hair was found on her body, which was likely to belong to the killer. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts were able to examine the hair under a microscope and estimate that it came from a man between the ages of 18 and 30. The investigation then focused on the victim's clothing, which was covered in soil. Police enlisted the help of a geologist to analyze the soil, along with a forensic team. They discovered that some of the soil contained a type of soil mined less than 10 miles from their town called North Georgia clay. However, other stains on the clothing were found to be from a different type of clay, mined by a company just 2 miles from where the body was found. Police theorized that the perpetrator did not kill Debbie immediately, but rather drove her to remote areas, sexually assaulting her in one location and killing her in another, before finally dumping her body in the woods. Police believe the killer may have been hired by one of the nearby mining companies. After contacting these companies, the police searched the employees of both companies but did not find the suspect or the vehicle described by the victims. Furthermore, they found fingerprints near the abduction site, but unfortunately, when these fingerprints were compared to the suspects, there was no match. Debbie's death sent shockwaves through the city, with thousands attending her funeral. Police repeatedly ran into roadblocks in their search for clues. Police officer Morris Nix investigated many suspects and eventually narrowed the list down to 4 people. For Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a top priority throughout his career. The case took a breakthrough with the creation of the FBI's DNA database. Experts successfully extracted a genetic profile from hair found on Debbie's body, which was then entered into the database. However, no matches were found. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, police reopened the case and decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. The clothing had been stored in an evidence vault since the crime. When re-examined, some of the evidence had degraded over time, resulting in only a partial DNA profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother gave an interview, expressing her hope that her daughter's killer would be found. After the tragedy, she found it unbearable to stay in their apartment, so she moved to another city. Her only wish was for the case to be solved before she died. Sadly, she died of cancer at the age of 78, just weeks after the interview, and was buried next to Debbie. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, which allowed them to conduct a more thorough analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts successfully extracted a full DNA sample, but unfortunately, the perpetrator's DNA was still not found in the FBI database. Debbie's father was interviewed and shared that he thought about his daughter every day for decades. Sadly, he passed away in 2022, shortly after the interview. Police turned their attention to the first piece of evidence they had, DNA. They partnered with a Florida company that specializes in an advanced DNA analysis technique called genomics. Police provided the company with all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited for the results. Experts created a DNA profile of the suspect and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. After analyzing thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed their search to a family in Marietta. In 2023, police asked the family to provide a DNA sample, which they agreed to. Analysis showed that the killer was indeed a close relative of the family. Experts re-examined the family tree and quickly identified a man named William Rose. However, William Rose committed suicide in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. Police obtained a warrant to exhume William Rose's remains and took a sample of William Rose's DNA for analysis. 51 years after Debbie's murder, police finally identified William Rose as the killer. At the time of the murder, William Rose, 24, lived in the same building as Debbie's family, and he visited them frequently. The case has finally been solved. Debbie's brother, Melvin, is the only living relative. Melvin attended a press conference and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case that lasted more than 50 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, and her family moved to the small town of Brawl shortly after her birth. Gretchen's father, a pastor, took a job at the local church, and Gretchen quickly grew to love the town. She spent much of her free time outdoors with her sisters and friends. Brawl was a safe community where parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until dark. As a member of a devoutly religious family, Gretchen spent much time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's family was eagerly awaiting the return of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen wanted to be home to greet them, but her father encouraged her to attend Sunday school to keep up her grades. Gretchen reluctantly agreed to go to church and set off with her Bible. Her older sisters, who usually walked with her, stayed home that morning. However, Gretchen wasn't worried about the short 8-minute walk to church. Sunday school is divided into 2 sessions. The first session takes place at Trinity Church and lasts an hour and a half. After that, some of the children go to Father Gretchen's church. But when the children arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not there. He assumed she might be at the first church, so he called to check. The pastor's wife answered, informing him that Gretchen was not there. She then told her husband, David, who was a Sunday school teacher. He was surprised by the news, since Gretchen had not attended his class that morning. Gretchen's father became worried when he couldn't find her. He asked David to contact the police and started searching the area between the churches and nearby streets, but she was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to the parents of her friends. But they were either at church or home. Her best friend, who was also David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread, the police quickly launched a search operation. Hundreds of volunteers joined in, many of whom knew Gretchen's father from his church. Together, they searched the entire town, then moved on to wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also deployed to scan the area from above. The search continued through the night, but to no avail. The next day, more volunteers joined in. Police posted flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance along the roads. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find Gretchen. After several days of searching, no significant clues were found and Gretchen's fate remains a mystery. The town is known for its safe environment, where children are often allowed to play outside freely without adult supervision from a young age. However, this sense of security is no longer there when Gretchen goes missing. Some people thought she might have run away from home, while others believed she had gone swimming in the river and drowned. However, the most alarming theory was that she had been abducted by someone. As a result, parents became extremely cautious and stopped letting their children go out alone. Police interviewed bystanders. They gathered some clues. One witness reported seeing a girl who looked like Gretchen near the church on the morning she went missing. According to the witness, a green sedan approached the girl, but the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. Police checked the owners of cars matching the description in the area. 4 days later, detectives received a new lead. A resident of Westchester, a town 30 minutes from Brawl, contacted police and reported finding children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Police immediately showed Gretchen's mother the shorts. But she confirmed that they did not belong to her daughter. The investigation into Gretchen's disappearance had stalled, with no progress made for several weeks. As a result, the police halted their search operation and shifted their focus to gathering more information. They continued to interview witnesses, but with each passing day, their hopes of finding Gretchen alive began to dwindle. Until October 14th, when police received a phone call. A jogger was running in a large national park, about 20 minutes from Brawl, when he stumbled upon a body. The jogger immediately alerted park rangers, who then notified the police. Upon arriving at the scene, police quickly determined that the body was that of a child. However, due to the severe state of decomposition, identification of the child was extremely difficult. Police suspected that Gretchen might be the victim, so they showed her parents the clothes found on her body. Gretchen's mother quickly identified them as her daughters because she had sewn them herself. Forensic experts later confirmed that the body was Gretchen's by comparing them to her dental records. They also determined that she had died from severe head trauma. Because the body was so badly decomposed, police were unable to gather further information, including whether Gretchen had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis was not available in 1975, leaving police without any further leads. News of the murder sparked renewed interest in the case, and police received numerous tips from the community. The investigation into Gretchen's death turned up no leads. Police screened nearby residents with a history of violent crime, but nothing came up. Months later, the case had made no progress. Over the years, the case was reopened periodically, and the police reviewed the available information. However, each time, the investigation yielded no new evidence. Even applying DNA analysis was of no help in this case, as no foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or clothing. The case of Gretchen's murder went unsolved for decades, occasionally resurfacing in newspapers and on television. However, it wasn't until recent years that the case regained widespread public attention. Two local journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime, dedicating several years to gathering information. As children, both Joanna and Mike grew up in the same town as Gretchen. Joanna, who was only 9 years old when the crime occurred, the town had changed forever, and children were no longer allowed to roam freely. Leave home unsupervised. This fear lasted for years, leaving a lasting impression on the townspeople, the memory of Gretchen's murder still fresh in their minds. To write their book, Joanna and Mike had access to the case files and interviewed individuals involved in the investigation. By carefully piecing together the events surrounding Gretchen's disappearance, they were able to reconstruct the entire story. The book, released in 2022, brought attention to Gretchen's case. Months later, a woman contacted police about Gretchen. The woman said she was 10 years old at the time of the murder and lived in Havertone, near Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her sisters, as well as many other kids in the area. She often slept over at friends' houses, and one night, while she was at her sister's house, she woke up in the middle of the night feeling someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw their father standing in front of her, who quickly left. The next day, she stayed another night. Her friend's dad continued to come into her bedroom and started touching her. The next morning, she finally told one of her sisters about what happened to her. She was surprised that it happened quite often with her friends. When the woman returned home, she shared her entire story with her parents. However, instead of going to the authorities, they banned her from ever going to her friend's house again. This was just a week before Gretchen went missing. The woman eventually revealed the identity of the man involved in her story, David Zanstra, the same pastor who taught at Sunday school. She also shared that a month after Gretchen went missing, one of her friends told her about the incident, that a man had tried to kidnap her. The girl refused to get into his car and later confided to her friends that the real culprit was David Zanstra. The woman provided her personal diary as evidence of the information provided. In her diary entry on September 15, 1975, she documented her friend's request to keep the encounter secret due to fears of potential harm from David Zanstra. Upon receiving this new information, the police immediately reopened the investigation into Gretchen's disappearance. While reviewing the case files, detectives discovered several suspicious factors that indirectly implicated David Zanstra. It was David Zanstra who reported Gretchen missing to the police, providing investigators with a detailed description of her clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front buttons and pockets without zippers or buttons, and a white shirt with braided hair. However, he mentioned that he had not seen Gretchen that day, raising questions about how he knew what she was wearing. His description was later confirmed by the discovery of her body, dressed exactly as he had described. Police closely examined David, the man who taught Sunday school at Gretchen's father's church. David initially claimed he had not seen Gretchen on the morning of her disappearance. However, David's alibi gave him enough time to kidnap Gretchen, kill her, dump her body in the park, and returned to the church to teach. The investigation revealed that David and his family had moved to another state just months after Gretchen went missing. This sudden move, combined with David's ownership of a green scooter, attracted the attention of the police. The police decided to question David, who was now 83 years old and living in Georgia. On July 17, 2023, they began questioning David. As the conversation progressed, David realized that the police suspected him of murder. In response, he denied all accusations and asked what evidence they had against him. David was confronted with incriminating evidence, including a woman's testimony about his inappropriate behavior at a sleepover and allegations of molesting his own daughter. When he learned that his secret had been exposed, David's demeanor changed. After 48 years of silence, he finally began to talk about the murder. According to David, on the morning of the murder, he drove his green American motor station wagon to the church where Gretchen's father was the pastor. He saw Gretchen leave the house and waited until no one was around before approaching her. He offered her a ride, and she agreed. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He stopped the car and instructed her to undress, but Gretchen refused and asked to go home. In response, David struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. He then removed her clothes and committed the crime before driving her to another park. He carried her body into the bushes and concealed it with branches. David then returned to the church to begin his classes. When David confessed to the crime, the police arrested him for Gretchen's murder. David went to Pennsylvania, where he was held pending trial. David's work held a respectable position in society, which protected him from suspicion. However, after the truth finally came to light, the police obtained a DNA sample and began comparing it with DNA from other unsolved cases. They also investigated the disappearances of young girls in the cities where he worked. Police have linked David to the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, who went missing in 1991. The case resembles Gretchen's. At the time, David Zanstra was a pastor in that same neighborhood. The police currently have no concrete evidence against David, but they have found similarities between the various cases and Gretchen's kidnapping. Therefore, they are investigating David as the possible perpetrator of the cases. The trial for Gretchen's murder has not yet begun. David's attorney is trying to delay the process and advise him to withdraw his confession. If this happens, the trial could drag on for years, and given his advanced age, David may not live to see the verdict. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young was born in 1974 in Brevard, North Carolina. Jason grew up in a typical family. After completing high school, he attended the prestigious State University in Raleigh, the state capital. Following graduation, he secured a job as a salesman at a large retail chain. Jason proved to be a valuable and reliable employee, but his friends described him as inconsistent and unpredictable in his relationships with women. He had a reputation for being a womanizer, often changing partners. Michelle Young was born in February 1977 in New York. She was raised in a close-knit family with her younger sister Meredith and their devoted mother Linda. Linda played a significant role in Michelle's early life, nurturing her passions and talents from a young age. Michelle's interests in law and economics were evident from her school days, and she dreamed of pursuing a career in this field. Michelle's academic journey led her to apply to several universities after high school, eventually gaining acceptance into a top university in North Carolina. There, she pursued her master's degree in economics. After completing her education, Michelle secured a prestigious job at a leading accounting firm in the state, rapidly establishing herself as a skilled professional. She achieved financial stability, was able to support herself fully. A chance encounter at a bar on Michelle's birthday, when Jason accidentally spilled a cocktail on her, he immediately apologized and offered to buy her another. This kind and thoughtful act caught Michelle's attention, and they began chatting. As they talked, they discovered that they had a lot in common. They both went to the same college, although Jason graduated 3 years earlier. Their casual conversation quickly turned into a romantic relationship, and they began dating. Although they had deep feelings for each other, they had no plans to get married or move in together. At the time, Jason still lived with his parents in Brevard, while Michelle lived in Raleigh. They would see each other on weekends or during Jason's business trips to Raleigh. During one of their meetings, Michelle dropped a bombshell: she was pregnant. This news came as a shock to both of them, as they were not yet ready to become parents. Jason and Michelle were young and focused on their careers, with no immediate plans to start a family. However, when Michelle became pregnant, she decided to keep the baby after some initial hesitation. Jason took a month to come to terms with the situation and then relocated to be closer to Michelle. After a few months, they got married, but it wasn't due to love or the pregnancy. Instead, it was because Michelle lacked health insurance, and the cost of childbirth would have been prohibitively expensive. Marriage provided a solution to this financial burden. Their daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 2004. Michelle threw herself into domestic life and family responsibilities, with the help of her mother and younger sister. Although Michelle's family was wary of Jason, they tried to avoid conflicts and accepted him as part of their family. Later that year, the young family moved into a large house in a quiet neighborhood. Michelle's mother, Linda, came to visit to help with housework and noticed a tense atmosphere in the home. Jason had a bad temper and often started arguments. Michelle tried to downplay these incidents and appear cheerful. However, she confirmed with her mother the true state of their relationship, which seemed ominous. When Cassidy was just 2 years old, Michelle found out she was pregnant again. She was nervous about sharing the news with her husband, but he took it calmly and even seemed happy. The family decided to visit Jason's parents in Brevard to share the news in person. They spent the weekend celebrating with relatives, and on Monday they left Cassidy with the grandparents for a few hours and went out to dinner to celebrate the event. As they were driving home, Jason, who was driving, overturned and the car went off the road into a ravine. They were left very frightened with a few scrapes and bruises, but their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had suffered a miscarriage, so Michelle was very worried. Jason was surprisingly calm about the accident. Before the accident, during a business trip, Jason met an old college friend, Michelle Money. She had the same name as Jason's wife, Michelle. Jason told his wife about it. They decided to invite Michelle Money to visit their home, and she agreed. During her visit, Michelle Money began to complain about her unhappy family life. At the same time, Michelle Money kept complimenting Jason and telling his wife that she was lucky to be pregnant. Michelle was not worried about Michelle Money's behavior, but she genuinely wanted to comfort her friend. Jason and Michelle Money began calling each other every day and secretly meeting each other. Jason always justified his absence with business trips, and his wife could not guess anything. Things got complicated in the summer of 2006, when Michelle found out she was pregnant. Unlike her previous pregnancies, Jason's reaction was unhappy and cold. Michelle attributed his sadness to her previous miscarriage, still not knowing the real reason for his cold behavior. In November, with Michelle 5 months pregnant, Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Michelle, who was pregnant, had a lengthy phone conversation with her best friend, discussing family problems and a heated argument she had with her husband the previous night. After the call, her husband left. Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Around 10 p.m., Jason arrived at a hotel, claiming fatigue from his journey. However, instead of resting, he began to carefully examine the hotel's entrances, exits, and security cameras, planning a way to leave and return undetected. He was creating a solid alibi for a crime he intended to commit. Early the next morning, Jason calls Meredith and asks for her help. He tells her that he wants to surprise his wife with a piece of jewelry for their anniversary, but accidentally sent the order confirmation to their home fax machine. Jason is worried that Michelle will see the gift and ruin the surprise. Even though Meredith doesn't like Jason, she agrees to help him. Meredith arrived at her sister's house, using a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about and that was always left unlocked. The house was unusually quiet, but Michelle's keys, wallet, and important papers were still in the hallway, suggesting she hadn't left the premises. When Meredith went upstairs, she found the bedroom door wide open, but neither Michelle nor her daughter responded to her calls. When she entered the room, Meredith was met with a horrific scene. Michelle lay on the floor by the bed, her skull fractured and her body surrounded by a large pool of blood. The walls, furniture, and floor were all stained with blood, and tiny footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, Michelle had been dead for hours. As Meredith rushed to call 911, she heard a faint noise coming from under the bed. When she looked back, she saw Michelle's young daughter, Cassidy, looking at her with a confused expression. Cassidy was unharmed. The little girl had witnessed her mother's brutal death and had spent many hours by her side. A forensic examination of Michelle's body later revealed a series of bruises, abrasions, and broken bones. Her teeth had been broken, and her skull had been fractured by a heavy object. A bloody pillow was found next to her body, with marks suggesting she had been suffocated by the pillow. The murder investigation revealed some crucial facts. First, nothing was stolen from the house, indicating that the killer's sole intention was to murder the Michelle. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry or broken locks, suggesting that the perpetrator had a key or knew about a secret door that only family members were aware of. Normally, Jason would be the prime suspect, but in this case, Jason seemed to have a solid alibi. He claimed to have checked into the hotel and not left until the morning, then attended a business meeting. Hotel records confirmed that he used a key card to enter and exit the room. However, upon closer inspection, investigators discovered several irregularities in Jason's alibi. A hotel employee found the fire escape open and propped up with a rock. When investigators reviewed surveillance footage to determine who had propped up the rock, they discovered that the camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the murder. Jason's room was last recorded about half an hour after he checked in. The strange events continued. Later that night, a man resembling Jason stopped at a gas station between the hotel and the crime scene. When asked to show identification as required by the station's rules, he refused, paid with cash, and hastily left without waiting for his change. The on-call attendant identified Jason, but he denied any involvement, claiming that he had spent the night in the hotel room. His actions, however, raised suspicion. On the day before the tragedy, Jason had made more than 24 calls to his wife, Michelle, and 5 more to his mistress, Michelle Money, each lasting less than 15 seconds, suggesting he was in a state of panic. Notably, these calls were made outside the hotel, contradicting his claim that he had been in the room all night. Additionally, Jason was late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners and appeared distracted. While these incidents were suspicious, they did not prove his guilt, so Jason was able to maintain his normal life for nearly 3 years. He even won custody of his young daughter, which was a huge blow to Michelle's family. Jason's case was reopened in 2012 with new evidence. Witnesses reported seeing his distinctive white car near his home on the night of the murders. A child psychologist testified about Jason's daughter reenacting a disturbing scene with her doll. And Jason's former mistress Michelle Money revealed Jason's mood swings and violent outbursts, and that he had confided in her about his marital woes. This testimony helped convict Jason of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As a result of Jason's actions, his daughter, Cassidy, was left without parents. Her mother was murdered, and her father is in prison for the crime. Cassidy is now being cared for by her aunt and maternal grandparents. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996, in Kansas, as the oldest of 5 children. She was a responsible sibling, often putting her parents' needs before her own. Her family was deeply rooted in their faith, spending a significant amount of time at church. When Zoe was in high school, her family moved to Dallas, where she attended a school that fostered her creativity and passion for the arts. She excelled in drawing and enjoyed participating in school plays. Outside of school, Zoe worked at an art studio and as a lifeguard during her summer breaks. After graduating, Zoe had the opportunity to attend top universities, but she decided to delay her education to focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing for a mission trip with her church. She planned to attend the Sunday service to discuss the trip's details. Zoe left her house around 4:40 p.m. in the family minivan, promising her parents she would return for dinner. However, she failed to come back, which was unusual for her. Zoe's parents tried to reach her after the service, but she didn't respond to their messages or calls. They then contacted her friends, thinking she might have visited someone, but no one had seen her. As the evening wore on, her parents grew increasingly worried and decided to call the church to see if Zoe had shown up there. However, they were surprised to learn that Zoe had never arrived at the church. This was highly unusual behavior for Zoe, as she had always kept her parents informed of her current whereabouts and had never disappeared without explanation. So they drove themselves to the police station to report Zoe missing, and the police began the search. The police spent all night retracing the route from Zoe's house to the church but found no sign of Zoe. Using an iPhone tracking app, police were able to locate her phone. They discovered Zoe's phone just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the street. Zoe's parents rushed to the creek. An officer approached them and informed them that a car accident had been reported a few hours earlier and that police had received a call from a witness walking a dog. That witness claimed that a man had approached him and said that a woman had been injured in a car accident near the creek. The witness rushed to the scene and found a woman lying in a pool of blood, so he called 911. As the police investigated, they quickly identified the victim as Zoe Hastings. However, it soon became clear that she had not died as a result of the accident. The evidence suggested that she had been murdered. Zoe's body was found a short distance from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a significant amount of blood near her body, and police observed multiple cuts on her neck. Her dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to suspect that the killer had likely assaulted and abused her. The police prevented Zoe's parents from approaching her body, shielding them from the gruesome scene. As they investigated further, they discovered several clues. Notably, all the minivan doors except the driver's side were locked, suggesting that the perpetrator may have driven the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. Beneath the bridge, about 10 feet from the creek, a blood-stained knife was discovered. It's likely that this was the weapon used in Zoe's murder. By examining her phone records and GPS data, investigators established that Zoe had arrived at the creek by 5:01 p.m. after leaving home at 4:41 p.m. GPS revealed she drove there in approximately 20 minutes, indicating her death probably occurred within a few minutes of arrival. To account for this timeline, investigators reconstructed her activities that afternoon, tracing her stops from leaving her home. During the examination, investigators uncovered evidence. Zoe visited the nearby DVD rental store after departing home. To return a DVD she borrowed from that rental shop situated beside a Walgreens, near her place of residence. More than 50 people near that area had confirmed it. Among them had been Lester Clark, a tattoo shop employee who had worked next door to the DVD store. It wasn't until a few hours after work around 4:45 p.m. that Lester revealed he had seen a female customer who had been shopping at the store and had approached her. Lester admitted to having witnessed Zoe going to the DVD rental store. Lester added that he saw a man behaving suspiciously near the crime scene. Lester described the man as short and heavily built, and African American. However, Lester was too far away to notice any other distinguishing features. Later that evening, Lester saw the same man walking towards the store alone. The second witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, corroborated Lester's account. At around 4:45 p.m., Gary saw a woman approaching a white minivan in the parking lot. A man then approached her from behind, preventing her from entering the vehicle. The man showed her something from his pocket, and the woman subsequently got into the car, moving to the passenger seat. The man then drove away. Gary also described the suspect as short and heavily built, and African American, and found the situation highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it is unclear if the clerk made the call. During the investigation, experts made several key discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined Zoe's body and found a small amount of male semen, indicating that Zoe had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. However, the amount of semen was too small to conduct a full DNA analysis. Investigators analyzed Zoe's car for any foreign fingerprints on the doors or steering wheel, but found none. This discovery, combined with witness statements, suggested that the killer may have driven Zoe away in her minivan. However, the lack of fingerprints did not mean that the killer did not drive the car, as they may have wiped down the surfaces after the crime. When examining Zoe's body, investigators found several hairs, but they were too small to extract a full DNA sample from. However, a breakthrough came when a DNA sample was found on a knife near the crime scene. The DNA was matched to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, who had a violent criminal history, including arrests for theft, assault, and home invasion. 1 year before the murder, Antonio was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of his girlfriend. According to the girl, Antonio offered her a ride, but took her to a secluded area and assaulted her. He was arrested and claimed that the sex was consensual, but the prosecution was unable to prove his guilt, and he was acquitted. Antonio became the prime suspect in the murder investigation. As a result, he was arrested. However, during the interrogation, Antonio denied any involvement in the crime. To gather more evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from Antonio and compared it to the semen found on the victim's body. Unfortunately, both DNA samples were too small for a full analysis, so the experts used a different method. The partial DNA profiles from the hair and semen were then compared to Antonio's DNA. The results showed that it was matched, but not definitively. Meanwhile, detectives searched Antonio's smartphone and found some incriminating text messages. On the day before the murder, Antonio sent a message to a friend he lived with, stating he was moving out and would never see him again. At 1:48 a.m. the next day, Antonio sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother had died right in front of him. But this information was later found to be false. In the hour leading up to Zoe's death, Antonio sent 2 texts to another woman, revealing that he had been drinking, driving around the city, and crying. These messages were his last before the incident. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted a friend, expressing confusion and despair about his life. The next day, he sent a message to his ex-girlfriend, stating that his life was over and that she would soon understand why. Detectives investigating Antonio's online activities found that he had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, with a particular focus on the crime sections. Notably, 5 of these access were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. This was unusual, as prior to the death of Zoe, Antonio rarely visited news sites. His browser history also showed a single visit to a page about gang activity. Further investigation of Antonio's smartphone revealed GPS data that, at 4:34 p.m., Antonio's phone connected to a cell tower covering the area where the store was located, coinciding with the time Zoe was there. Although this data was not conclusive evidence, it suggested that Antonio's phone was in the vicinity of the store just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. This was significant, as Antonio's home was far away, and his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower throughout the day. Detectives discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, on the day after the murder, he skipped his shift without providing any explanation. Despite the extensive circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the strongest evidence remained his DNA on the knife handle. Nevertheless, this evidence alone might not be enough for a conviction, as merely holding a knife does not prove involvement in the murder. It is possible that Antonio used the knife in a different context, and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. Since no other evidence was found, detectives decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its report of the events. According to the prosecution, Antonio approached Zoe in the parking lot, threatening her with a knife and forcing her to get into her car. He then took the driver's seat and drove away. The prosecution argued that Antonio, who was emotionally distressed due to the death of a relative and intoxicated from consuming a significant amount of alcohol. The investigators' theory was that Antonio had intended to assault Zoe when he abducted her. He chose his victim, Zoe, by chance when he spotted her in the parking lot. Antonio saw an opportunity to commit a crime and acted on it. He then drove to a secluded creek area that was difficult to spot due to the surrounding trees and low-lying terrain. At this location, he forced Zoe out of the car and attacked her, stabbing her 6 times in the neck area. Antonio got back into the car and tried to drive it into the creek, possibly to hide any remaining evidence. However, the car only partially submerged, allowing Antonio to potentially wipe his fingerprints from the steering wheel and door handle before fleeing the scene and return to the store, where Lester had seen him according to initial testimony. The defense argued that most of the evidence was not convincing enough and did not prove Antonio's guilt. For example, hair analysis only showed that the DNA could not be ruled out as belonging to Antonio. But it did not confirm his involvement. DNA on the knife also did not necessarily prove that Antonio committed murder. The defense argued that Antonio could have touched the knife under different circumstances before working at the store. They suggested he might have used the knife while working at a movie theater, where he sometimes collected items left behind by visitors. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Furthermore, if someone had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to be careful to avoid removing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been a difficult task. The defense attempted to downplay the testimony of the second witness, Gary, by revealing that Gary had a warrant for his arrest due to a parole violation. They tried to exclude Gary's testimony, but the prosecution argued that Gary's willingness to cooperate with police, despite the risk of arrest, proved his sincerity. Gary insisted he wanted to do the right thing, even if it meant getting arrested. Antonio's lawyers argued that their client was elsewhere at the time of Zoe's murder in order to helping a friend, but they failed to provide any substantial evidence to support this claim. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, they realized this would be difficult to achieve with the available evidence. They dropped the request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Antonio guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed gratitude to the investigators and all those involved in the trial for delivering justice for their daughter. Her father shared that he had always warned his children about the dangers of the world and had taken every precaution to protect them. However, despite his efforts, his eldest daughter was abducted just a short distance from their home, and he was powerless to prevent it. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jessica Dishon. Jessica Dishon was born on May 2, 1982, in the small town of Shepherdsville, Kentucky. As the eldest of 3 children, Jessica took on significant responsibilities from a young age, helping her parents care for her 2 younger brothers while they worked. At age 15, Jessica started working part-time at a restaurant to save money to buy her first car, a red Pontiac. A few years later, she bought the car she wanted. Despite her job, Jessica excelled in school and began planning to attend college, where she hoped to study accounting. In the fall of 1999, 17-year-old Jessica was about to start her senior year of high school. She had also started dating a boy, which made her very happy. On the morning of Friday, September 10th, Jessica's parents went to work, and her younger brothers caught the bus to school. However, Jessica did not leave for school as planned. Later that day, around noon, Jessica's mother returned home from work and noticed something unusual. Jessica's car was still parked in front of the house. The mother went to Jessica's room, thinking that maybe she had overslept and missed school. But Jessica was not in her bedroom. The mother then considered the possibility that Jessica might have gotten a ride to school from her father, so she called him to ask. However, he told her that he had gone to work alone that morning. Jessica's mother suspected something was wrong with her car, so she took out a spare key to try to start the car. When she approached the car, the driver's door was slightly open, and Jessica's cell phone was lying on the seat with the numbers 9 and 1 displayed on the screen, indicating that she had tried to call 911. Jessica's shoes and keys were found under the front seat, while her textbooks, work clothes, and purse were in the back seat. Jessica's mother was worried about Jessica's safety. It was obvious that she had tried to call for help but was unsuccessful. Furthermore, Jessica could not leave her belongings in the car and leave. Jessica's parents contacted her school, learning that Jessica had not come to class that day. When Jessica's best friend at work called her parents a few hours later, saying that Jessica had not come to work, they became even more worried about Jessica. Jessica's parents immediately contacted the police, but the sheriff downplayed the situation, suggesting that Jessica might have wandered off and would return home on her own. Despite Jessica's parents' pleas, the sheriff refused to open an investigation. Undeterred, Jessica's parents contacted relatives, friends, and acquaintances, but no one had any information about Jessica's whereabouts. They then searched the entire town, scouring the area, but there was no sign of her. The next morning, Jessica's parents returned to the sheriff's office to report that she had not returned home. The sheriff sent 2 officers to check Jessica's car. However, the officers searched the car without wearing gloves, potentially destroying evidence. Furthermore, the officers did not search Jessica's room. Feeling frustrated with the police, Jessica's parents sought the help of the local media, hoping to draw attention to Jessica's disappearance and the police's lack of attention. Jessica's family and friends, led by her father and Uncle Stanley, launched a search for Jessica. They also distributed flyers with information about Jessica. Fearing the worst, they focused their search on an area near a river, which was known to be a crime hub. For hours, Jessica's family members thoroughly searched the challenging terrain near the river but couldn't find any sign of Jessica. The next morning, Jessica's parents were at home and their son was playing in the yard. Suddenly, he rushed inside, saying he had heard a faint cry for help that sounded exactly like his sister's voice. Jessica's father immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside to find the source of the screams. At the same time, his brother arrived and joined the search. They quickly noticed smoke coming from the property of their neighbor, 40-year-old David Brooks. As they approached, they saw Brooks undressing on his property. Jessica's father asked Brooks for permission to search his farm, but Brooks refused and told them to leave. This was not the only unusual behavior Brooks displayed. Before Jessica's disappearance, the two families had a normal relationship. However, soon after, he would drive slowly past their house, staring at them with an ominous smile. After seeing Brooks burning clothes on their property, Jessica's parents went back to the police, shared their concerns and asked them to come and meet Brooks with the dogs. The police agreed. The dogs were given some of Jessica's clothes to track her scent. They led the police to Brooks's fire pit, but no significant evidence was found. However, the dogs did find black gloves in one of Brooks's sheds that smelled like decomposition. During the search, no concrete evidence was found. Frustrated with the police, Jessica's father contacted the FBI for help. The FBI usually does not get involved in missing persons cases based on the family's request, but this time they decided to investigate immediately. After Jessica's parents presented the case and the family's findings, the FBI opened a full-scale investigation. The FBI proceeded to collect fingerprints from Jessica's room and her car, confiscating all potential evidence for further analysis. Additionally, investigators conducted a comprehensive search of the area using helicopters and volunteers. They thoroughly examined the pond near Jessica's home. The FBI searched Brooks' farm and found a printed photo of Jessica. This discovery led the FBI to strongly suspect Brooks' involvement in her disappearance. They also suspected his 35-year-old brother, Joseph, although despite a thorough search, the FBI found no evidence. Due to lack of incriminating evidence, the investigation focused on searching the surrounding area. 17 days after Jessica went missing, police received a call on September 27th. A woman was driving along a road near the river. Noticing something unusual near a tree, the woman stopped to check and was horrified to see a body. She called the police immediately. When FBI agents arrived, they discovered the body of a young woman who had suffered severe trauma. She was missing several fingers and toes. A rope tied around her legs showed traces of red and silver paint. Additionally, some of her clothing was missing, suggesting that she may have been sexually assaulted, leading the FBI to develop disturbing theories about the murder. Medical experts later confirmed the identity and determined that Jessica had been strangled. Her body also showed extensive bruising. Her limbs and fingers had been separated after death, suggesting that she was still alive when this happened. However, the most disturbing fact was that Jessica had survived for approximately 3 days after she went missing. This meant that the police had the opportunity to rescue her. But unfortunately, they did not take any action to do so. After the body was discovered, the FBI re-interviewed Brooks, who changed his story. He initially said he had seen Jessica near her home, but later said he had not seen her. His alibi was disputed by his wife, and he failed a polygraph test, prompting the FBI to arrest him and proceed to trial. The FBI said the likelihood of a conviction was low due to a lack of concrete evidence. While they had some troubling clues that pointed to his involvement, they were circumstantial and inconclusive. As the trial progressed, detectives continued to search for additional evidence. During a re-examination of Brooks' car, they found a rope similar to the one used to tie Jessica up. However, analysis showed no DNA on the rope. Brooks' trial began in January 2003. His attorney maintained his innocence, citing a lack of evidence. During the trial, it was revealed that investigators had found the victim's missing limbs but had not properly preserved them, causing them to decompose and lose potential evidence. The remaining circumstantial evidence was insufficient to convict, and the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in Brooks' acquittal. Under state law, he could only be brought back if new evidence was discovered. Jessica's parents were devastated by the outcome. The parents also felt that if the police had done their job properly, Jessica might still be alive. Over time, the case went cold and was largely abandoned, leaving the family without closure. In 2012, a new detective, Lynn Hunt, joined the local police department and was tasked with reviewing unsolved cases. Lynn Hunt began by examining the murder case of Jessica. However, she was shocked to find that the original investigation was poorly handled, with case files containing errors and lacking key information from interviews with relevant parties. The evidence was also not properly documented, forcing Lynn Hunt to start the investigation from scratch 13 years after the crime. Hunt met with Jessica's family and obtained a box of her belongings that had been kept in her car at the time of the murder. One of her brothers, now an adult, had kept the box since the police returned the items to the family. Lynn Hunt was again disappointed by the careless handling of the evidence, as it had not been stored according to protocol. Her efforts paid off when she discovered a crucial document, Brooks' medical examination report, which revealed that Brooks had an IQ of 61, which is considered low. With a low IQ, Brooks may not have fully understood the questions and may have given incomplete answers. All of this led Lynn Hunt to think that this man might not have anything to do with the case. Lynn Hunt began to consider other suspects. Lynn Hunt conducted an extensive review of everyone connected to the case and those living in the surrounding area. This investigation continued until September 2014, nearly 15 years after Jessica's death. A coworker contacted Lynn Hunt with information about an inmate at the Kentucky State Prison who claimed to know who killed Jessica. Lynn Hunt initially dismissed the information as unreliable. Many inmates make up stories to get released early. However, Lynn Hunt verified the information before dismissing it. Lynn Hunt visited the prison and met a man who told her that he had previously shared a cell with another inmate. During conversations, the inmate revealed to him that he was responsible for the murder of Jessica Dishon. The informant revealed that Stanley Dishon, Jessica Dishon's uncle, had a dark secret. According to the informant, Stanley confessed to years of sexual abuse of Jessica while they lived under the same roof. He warned her that if she spoke about the abuse, he would kill her or someone she cared about. When Jessica started dating in the spring of 1999, Stanley became increasingly fearful that she might confide in her boyfriend about the abuse she had suffered at his hands. On September 10th, Stanley visited Jessica at her home when she was alone, and he saw her packing her belongings into her car. He approached her and asked her to end her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Jessica refused, threatening to expose Stanley's actions if he did not leave her alone. As Stanley threatened her, causing Jessica to reach for the phone to call 911. Stanley tried to grab her, but she broke free and ran back to her room. Stanley followed her into her room, striking her before binding her with her own sheets. Stanley then dragged her to an abandoned shed not far from where her body would later be discovered. Stanley held Jessica captive for several days, subjecting her to abuse and torture before ultimately killing her. Stanley then placed her body in a visible location near the road and buried the bloody sheets under the shed. Additionally, Stanley removed some of Jessica's limbs in an attempt to mislead the police, making it seem like the murder was the work of drug traffickers. Lynn Hunt was intrigued to discover that this crucial detail about the missing limbs had never been made public. Only Jessica's closest relatives were aware that her body had been mutilated, which meant the informant couldn't have fabricated this information. Furthermore, Stanley claimed to have buried Jessica's shoe under a broken tree near the shed. Determined to verify the informant's story, Lynn Hunt decided to search for buried evidence. With limited resources at the local police department, she enlisted the help of Jessica's brother and other relatives, keeping Stanley's possible guilt a secret. She did not report her suspected evidence to them. On the first day of the search, no clues were found despite searching the areas described by the informant. The next day, Jessica's brother and Lynn Hunt returned to the scene. On the way, they noticed an abandoned barn on the side of the road and decided to search. Inside the barn, they began digging. Their search uncovered a buried bed sheet. Lynn Hunt collected the evidence and rushed to Jessica's home. Since her disappearance, her parents had left her room unchanged, which helped in verifying the evidence. Upon comparison, Lynn Hunt confirmed that the bed sheet was indeed from Jessica's bedding, as it matched the pattern of the other linens and was missing from her bed. Following this discovery, Stanley was arrested and questioned by police. Although he appeared visibly shaken during questioning, he refused to confess to the crime. Stanley was eventually charged with murder and the case went to trial. This news shocked Jessica's father. The murderer he had been searching for was none other than his own brother Stanley Dishon. As the trial progressed, Lynn Hunt dug into Stanley's past to gather more evidence. She knew that he had assaulted Jessica, but her investigation uncovered that several of Stanley's female relatives had come forward to report that he had sexually abused them as children. Stanley would approach his relatives, claiming he was temporarily homeless, and asked to stay at their home. However, when left alone with the young girls in their homes, Stanley would sexually assault them, threatening them to ensure their silence. Based on multiple similar accounts, police deduced that Stanley had been engaging in this behavior for approximately 3 decades. Lynn Hunt knew full well that a conviction for murder would be difficult, given the lack of direct evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, linking Stanley to the crime. Undeterred, Lynn Hunt continued her investigation and stumbled upon a box of old case files that had not been examined before. As she sifted through the boxes, Lynn Hunt was once again frustrated with the police who had originally handled the case. She noticed a letter dated June 26, 2002. A concerned person had written to the police at the time, recounting a story identical to one Lynn Hunt later heard from an inmate at the Kentucky penitentiary. In the summer of 2002, Stanley was serving a sentence for assaulting a minor family member. While in prison, he confided in a fellow inmate about killing his niece, Jessica. Unbeknownst to Stanley, his fellow inmate was a police informant who soon wrote a detailed letter to the police investigating the case, exposing the horrific events surrounding Jessica's death. However, police believed Brooks was the prime suspect at the time, causing them to ignore other potential leads. This inaction left Lynn Hunt deeply frustrated, becoming frustrated with the lack of professionalism of his colleagues. If the police had done their job properly, this case could have been solved in 2002. After all these years, Lynn Hunt could only hope that Stanley would finally face justice for his actions at the upcoming trial. The process began in 2015 when Stanley appeared in court, pleading not guilty. Jessica's parents were furious. The prosecution believed that a guilty verdict on the murder charges would be difficult due to a lack of evidence. There were also assault charges against other female family members. The prosecution would need these family members to testify in court, sharing explicit details about Stanley's actions against them. Given these challenges, the prosecution decided to offer Stanley a plea deal. In exchange for dropping the death penalty, Stanley would have to plead guilty to both the assaults on his relatives and Jessica's murder. Ultimately, Stanley accepted the deal and pleaded guilty. Jessica's parents, who wanted the truth, were unhappy with this arrangement, but Stanley remained silent in accordance with the terms of the plea deal. Stanley was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Since he was 56 years old at the time of his conviction, he could be released at age 71.